Chapter 651. The remaining power was all condensed in his dantian. Fortunately, the spirit congealing pill could still work. After a while, it slowly condensed the broken spiritual qi in his sea of qi and repaired part of the injury. After doing all this, Fang Yu could barely stabilize his body. His life was saved. However, it would take a lot of time and various heavenly treasures to heal the injuries to his divine soul and realm. With some anger in his heart, Fang Yu slowly looked at the two figures on the statue. The power of concept that had suddenly appeared just now had come from one of these two people. Although he didn't know who it was, the two of them were obviously up to no good. However, at this time, Fang Yu had no strength to argue with them. He could only secretly remember the appearance of the two figures. It was never too late for a gentleman to take revenge. Fang Yu would definitely take revenge for this. Forcibly restraining his anger, the two figures on the statue also moved. Their gazes were fixed on the ground below, especially when they saw Fang Yu. The expression in their eyes was self-evident. This kid is a moldable talent, but unfortunately, one of the figures shook his head. Okay, don't talk nonsense, there is not much time. The other person shook his head directly, nodded to the crowd waiting below and said, "You are very strong, you can all go to Desolate City Mountain to look for opportunities." After he finished speaking, a wave of intent realm power suddenly exploded from his hands. The power of conception shrouded the space below the statue in a moment. Then, the two of them worked together, and the space in front of Fang Yu began to distort. Great! Let's go quickly! Let's go first! The group of people who had passed the test couldn't wait to jump into the distorted space. Fang Yu was slightly taken aback. He felt that something was off. The two figures above the statue always gave him an indescribable feeling. Especially when the two of them said Desolate City Mountain. He always felt that they were up to no good. However, as for why they were strange, Fang Yu couldn't tell. Seeing that all the people in front of him had gone in, he could only shake his head and follow their footsteps into the distorted space. As soon as he stepped in, the space around him began to distort. After a moment of distortion, a wave of dizziness swept through Fang Yu's body. Fang Yu, who was already seriously injured, seemed to be powerless against the power of the spatial distortion. Even though he had already been teleported countless times, he had no idea how many times he had been teleported. But this time, Fang Yu felt the most bumpy ride he had ever taken. A feeling of dizziness engulfed his entire body. Just as Fang Yu was about to vomit, the feeling slowly disappeared. There was a moment of darkness in front of him, and he had already reached the end of the spatial teleportation. After coming out from the end of the tunnel, Fang Yu was stunned. Red. What came into view was a sea of scarlet. The space in front of him was extremely dark. All around them was a sea of scarlet. The thick and turbid smell of blood in the air made Fang Yu uncomfortable. Moreover, this space was filled with an extremely strange power. This power was definitely not the aura of an ordinary expert. It was more like the aura of a bloodthirsty spiritual beast. This aura, accompanied by the thick smell of blood, spread all around, making it difficult for people to get used to it. Around him stood the people who had just been teleported in. These people were all looking at each other, and their expressions were similar to Fang Yu's. Where is this? Why does Mount Desolate City look like this? Something is wrong. Even without Fang Yu's reminder, this group of people had already sensed something strange. Mount Desolate City was a mountain range. Although it was barren and incomparably desolate, it would definitely not be this kind of gray and bloody color. This place was more like hell than anything else. This oppressive atmosphere was really uncomfortable. Crash. Just as everyone was puzzled, several figures jumped down from the valley. After these figures landed, the air was filled with the smell of blood. Below their feet there was a crash. Blood. Some people had already reacted. Looking at the faint layer of viscous scarlet on the ground, they realized that they were in a blood swamp. The thick smell of blood and the strong hostility in the surroundings spread out from this blood swamp. Many people had already panicked and realized that something was wrong. How is this Mount Desolate City? This is hell. Where did those two fellows send us? Many people roared. 23, and there are 3 more. Not bad. However, at this time, the few people who had just landed from the sky did not seem to care about the people at all. They counted as if they were counting their prey. What do you mean? Many people who reacted quickly had already noticed that something was wrong. They looked at the few people with a gloomy face and asked, "Forget it, I'll let you know before you die." Among the few people, a strange-looking young man sneered and said, "This is Heart-Devouring Valley." Heart-Devouring Valley? Many people were puzzled. Heart-Devouring Valley is an independent space created by the Heart-Devouring Demon. Where you are now is the blood swamp in the deepest part of Heart-Devouring Valley. The young man had no intention of hiding anything and explained directly. "Why did you send us to this damned place?" "That's right, what is in this damned place?" Many people had already started to lose their patience and started shouting one after another. "Don't be so agitated. I'm here to tell you that I sent you here to ask for your help." A middle-aged man next to the young man said in a deep voice as he stood in front of the shouting people with a smile. "After that," he added, "as for what you want to help with, that is to offer your cultivation and body as nourishment for the heart-devouring demon master's cultivation." "What do you mean? What nourishment?" The middle-aged man's last sentence was calm and powerful. It sounded a little frightening. Heart-devouring demon master, nourishment for the body. Looking at the viscous blood pool beneath their feet, everyone felt their hearts skip a beat. Many people had heard of a similar cultivation method. It used the cultivation of a martial king expert as bait and the body as nourishment. It was refined into a blood pill. After swallowing this blood pill, the power would become cold and strange. Ordinary experts would not be able to withstand the erosion of this power. However, there was a cultivation method that had been lost in the Shire state. It was the heart-devouring technique. Those who cultivated this cultivation method would have a body that was cold and unsteady. The power of their spiritual energy was also extremely strange. After cultivating, their physique would become very special. Not only could they withstand the strange power of the blood pill, but they could also devour this power and use it for their own use, increasing their strength by a lot. Anyone who cultivates this kind of cultivation method must be an extremely evil person. Chapter 652. However, the blood-devouring technique was too bloody. Once one failed to cultivate it, they would be devoured by the cold yin qi, causing irreversible damage. They would be accompanied by the pain of being devoured for the rest of their lives. Therefore, this technique had been listed as the greatest taboo technique in Shire State hundreds of years ago. No one was allowed to cultivate it. This was because the cultivation process of this kind of cultivation method was simply too bloody. In the end, it was very likely that one would become neither a human nor a demon. If one wanted to cultivate into a demon, they would need a lot of nourishment from flesh and blood. It could be said that a demon's body was watered by thousands of bodies of flesh and blood. Just like a martial venerable or even a martial saint expert, they needed countless heavenly treasures to nourish them. No one knew who was cultivating the blood-devouring technique in the heart-devouring valley. However, Fang Yu knew that this person was definitely not ordinary. "Alright, nourishment, have a good rest. In a few days you will be sacrificing yourselves," the middle-aged man said with a smile and turned to leave. "What heart-devouring valley? What nourishment? We are here to look for opportunities. Who wants to stay here?" After hearing the middle-aged man's words, the group of people instantly went crazy. Their eyes were filled with fear. After all, this blood-devouring technique sounded extremely cruel and frightening. At this moment, when they found out that they were the nourishment, they immediately panicked. Some were furious, some were fearful, and some were flustered. Only Feng Yu was still calm. He had long been suspicious in his heart. The two peak martial emperors outside had nothing to do with the desolate city mountain. It was very strange to set up a barrier there. Moreover, the desolate city mountain was behind the barrier. At such a close distance, it was very strange to spend so much energy to activate the space transmission. Only now did Feng Yu come to his senses. The so-called trial was just to select people with strong wills for the bloodthirsty demon master. Only those with strong wills were qualified to become nourishment for the bloodthirsty demon master. And these people had flocked here, fighting to be the first to participate in the test. Little did they know that this test was to see if they were qualified to become nourishment for others. It was ridiculous to think about it. Feng Yu shook his head. Now that he thought about it carefully, all he could think about these days was the matter of the crystal store. For the sake of crystals, he did not hesitate to spend so much effort. Although he had tried every means to obtain so many crystals, in the end, it was still for the sake of improving his cultivation. However, this method was too easy to lose. Almost from the moment the first peerless grade pill was auctioned off at Zishuan Pavilion at a high price, Feng Yu's thoughts were completely focused on peerless grade pills. They only wanted to get crystals, exchange them for realms, and take shortcuts. He had forgotten that he was down to earth and had gone astray, neglecting his proper duties. Now, he was seriously injured. His intent realm and spiritual energy had suffered irreversible damage. Furthermore, they were trapped in the heart-devouring valley and were about to become nourishment for others. As for the two peak martial emperors, they had done all of this without anyone noticing. After all, everyone here had snuck in. No one would know that they had appeared in the desolate city mountain, and no one would know that they had been sent to the independent space of the heart-devouring valley. Everyone, let's attack together. We must charge out. Beside him, many people had already joined forces and their auras suddenly burst out. They were not fools. At this time, they naturally would not sit still and wait for death. More than 20 people, except for Feng Yu, condensed their power together. Then, they blasted toward the top of the valley. It's futile, Feng Yu shook his head. This was an independent space condensed by the heart-devouring technique. This independent space was just like the 8 desolate mystery land. In the 8 desolate mystery land, Feng Yu was the master, deciding the life and death of all things. In the heart-devouring valley, the heart-devouring demon lord was the real master. This was his territory. If they wanted to get out, they had to blast this space into pieces. When this space node became unstable, they would have a chance to get out. Unless it was a powerhouse whose strength and realm were much higher than his, it was impossible to blast this space into pieces and get out. Boom, 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 the power condensed by more than 20 people was still considered violent. A huge shadow directly bombarded the top of the valley. After a series of loud booms, that side of the canyon shook slightly. It wasn't as fragile as they had imagined. The combined power of 20 Martial King realm powerhouses was just this. Only Feng Yu knew that in this independent space, their strength would be suppressed. Even if they were not suppressed, their strength could only blast this side of the valley. It was impossible to blast this space into pieces. In this place, Martial King realm powerhouses like them were just like ants. How is this possible? How can this be? It's useless. After everyone blasted out this berserk power, they suddenly realized that their power was so insignificant. Many people's faces were filled with sorrow and despair. In such an environment, people's thoughts would naturally be more pessimistic. No, let's try again. There were still many people who did not believe it and continued to bombard this space indiscriminately. Unfortunately, it was futile. Originally, they were very excited that they had passed the trial. Now that they suddenly knew what had happened to them, Their hearts were in turmoil. Despair filled this side of the valley. Haha, I advise you not to waste your energy. This is an independent space. With your little strength, you can't do anything. Save your strength and wait for death. The middle-aged man's figure slowly disappeared from this side of the valley. When he disappeared, a gloomy voice could be vaguely heard. Back then, a martial venerable powerhouse fell here. Accept your fate. After he finished speaking, his figure completely disappeared. More than 20 people were left behind, their faces filled with despair. Heart-devouring valley immediately regained its peace. A few of the more quick-witted ones had already left the crowd. They carefully came to the edge of the blood swamp and tried to rush out of this blood swamp. Bang, however, the moment their feet stepped out of the blood swamp, a loud sound came from all over their bodies. Then, a few visible cracks appeared on their bodies. A few pillars of blood spurted out from the cracks. They dripped into the blood swamp and merged with the blood swamp. This blood swamp has a boundary, Fong Yu muttered in his heart. It seemed that this blood swamp was the master of this space, the heart-devouring demon master, who allowed them to move freely. Anyone who crossed the boundary would die. Chapter 653. Hiss. After the two men were killed in an instant, the sound of people sucking in cold breaths of air could be heard beside Fong Yu. Many people watched as the two men turned into a bloody mist. That scene was quite shocking. This place was simply too strange. For those who had never cultivated spatial cultivation methods, they were completely baffled. However, they were not fools. At this time, they could clearly feel that this swamp was the only place they could stay. Anyone who left this place would die. Despair instantly shrouded this space once again. Many people were already sitting paralyzed in the blood swamp, as if waiting for the arrangement of fate. They did not know what kind of existence the heart-devouring demon lord was. However, some people knew that the heart-devouring technique was extremely evil. Back then, many people cultivated it. Therefore, this space in Shire State ushered in a rain of blood. Many experts had died under this evil technique. At that time, Shire State was also in a state of chaos. Later, a few experts in the martial sage realm took action and forcibly suppressed a few people who cultivated the heart-devouring technique. Then, they destroyed the heart-devouring technique. No one knew where the heart-devouring demon lord obtained such an evil technique. However, looking at the scarlet color in the blood swamp, at least thousands of people had already died here. The bloodthirsty demon lord's strength must have reached a certain level. Otherwise, he would not have made two experts at the peak of the martial emperor realm risk their lives for him. With this thought in mind, Fong Yu did not stay idle. He did not want to sit and wait for death and become nourishment for the heart-devouring demon lord. The spiritual qi in his Dantian qi si had already recovered a lot. Fong Yu gave it a try, and he was already able to mobilize some spirit energy. He slowly gathered the spiritual qi in his body. Just as he was about to use it, a strange power from the horizon instantly enveloped Fong Yu. After this power enveloped Fong Yu, the spiritual qi in his body instantly weakened a lot. It was obvious that this was the suppression of the realm in this blood swamp. However, Fong Yu naturally did not use a powerful technique. Although his cultivation level was suppressed, he could still barely open the entrance to the 8 desolate mystery land. There was a slight distortion in space, and Fong Yu raised his leg and buried himself in it. Heart-devouring Valley was the territory of the heart-devouring demon master, and the Ba Huang mystery land was Fong Yu's territory. Reaching the 8 desolate mystic realm, it was Fong Yu who had the final say. Who is it? Where is he? The middle-aged man, who had disappeared earlier, suddenly reappeared when he sensed the power of space distorting in the blood swamp. After seeing Fong Yu's disappearing figure, he couldn't help but frown. This was the heart-devouring valley, where there was a spatial enchantment. He did not think that anyone would be able to escape from here. As for Fong Yu, he disappeared right before his eyes. If the heart-devouring demon lord were to pursue this matter, they would not be able to keep their lives. To be able to escape from this space so easily, the other party must be very strong. After pondering for a moment, he regained his composure. As if nothing had happened, he left this side of the canyon. This time, the two peak martial emperors had not told the heart-devouring demon lord about the people sent over, so he was not worried. In the 8th desolate mystic realm, Fang Yu held his breath and focused. With the effect of the congealing pill and the rich spiritual energy in the 8th desolate mystic realm, the speed of recovery of the broken sea of Qi had increased by a lot. Ding. Detected that the host's soul is severely injured. Ding. The system has recommended a top-grade crystal for you. Sky Traveling Pill. Effect: condense the soul and stabilize the realm. Price: 500 crystals. Just as Fang Yu was holding his breath and focusing, the system's mechanical voice suddenly sounded in his ears. Sky Traveling Pill. Fang Yu had forgotten about this. Previously, he had seen it in the crystal store. However, at that time, Fang Yu's thoughts were all on the cultivation method. He did not notice that the price was so low, but the effect was very high. The system automatically recommended it, so it was naturally good stuff. Fang Yu did not hesitate and directly exchanged for the Sky Traveling Pill. Now was not the time to feel sorry for the crystals. Not only was he severely injured, but now, he was also trapped in this independent space by the heart-devouring demon lord. It was obviously not easy to escape. The only thing he could do now was to recover his strength to the peak, so that he could escape. In one breath, he exchanged for several types of ultimate elixirs similar to the Sky Traveling Pill. Fang Yu did not have many crystals left. There were only about 3,000 crystals left. Although it was a little painful, the effect of these ultimate elixirs was indeed extraordinary. The broken sea of Qi had basically recovered at this time. Fang Yu could even feel the rich spiritual energy slowly swimming in his sea of Qi. And the severely injured soul and realm were also slowly recovering with the help of the two ultimate elixirs. Just like that, he sat quietly in the 8th desolate mystic realm for 2 months. The injuries on Fang Yu's body had almost recovered. However, his realm was still not very stable. It seemed that the impact of the power of will last time had seriously injured him. He did not know what was going on outside. After thinking about it, Fang Yu used 5 crystals to exchange for a butterfly-shaped spirit beast in the crystal store. He infused a trace of spiritual energy from his dantian into the butterfly. The butterfly opened its wings and flew out with the wind as if it was reborn. Fang Yu nodded with satisfaction. This butterfly, after being infused with his spiritual energy, could be considered as a remnant of his soul. However, it did not have an independent consciousness. To be precise, it was a puppet controlled by Fang Yu. The space in front of him slowly distorted. The puppet butterfly flew out from the exit of the 8th desolate mystic realm. The space was distorted. When the puppet butterfly appeared above the heart-devouring valley, it did not attract much attention. At this time, the group of people in the heart-devouring valley had already lined up. Although 2 months had passed in the 8th desolate mystic realm. But in the heart-devouring valley, the time was almost the same as outside. Only a few days had passed. In these few days these people must have been suffering. Their faces were all filled with despair. Their eyes were not as frightened as before. It seemed that many people had tried to escape, but in the end they did not manage to do so. Killing the heart. This should be the main effect of the bloodthirsty demon lord. The reason why he left them in the heart-devouring valley was to make them despair. When they were completely in despair, and were shrouded in fear for a long time, they would naturally want to be free. At that time, the bloodthirsty demon lord did not even have to do it himself. These people would obediently hand over their realm power and their bodies. One had to admit that the bloodthirsty demon lord's move was too vicious. Chapter 654. At the bottom of the valley, the group of people were almost like walking corpses at this time, following the person in front of them without any direction. These days, they had resisted what they could, and it was obviously futile. Therefore, they had basically accepted their fate. All of them lowered their heads and carefully followed the person in front of them, walking forward. Many of them even had a look of relief on their faces. Apart from this blood swamp, there was a valley behind them. However, this valley did not stop the group's footstep. They slowly climbed up the valley in an orderly manner. The people behind them followed closely without any direction. The middle-aged man in front of them seemed to have long been used to this kind of situation. These people had already broken down, so he did not have to worry at all. He just strode forward. The heart-devouring demon master lived in seclusion in a huge cave in the depths of this valley. As for what he looked like, no one had seen him until now. After all, those who had seen him had already become nourishment. These middle-aged men were just in cahoots with the two martial emperors outside. They were providing support from inside and outside, working for the bloodthirsty demon master. These years, they were only responsible for sending the bloodthirsty demon master's people to the cave entrance on time. Their mission was considered complete. As for the people who were sent into the cave, they did not know what happened to them. Most probably, they had already become nourishment. This valley wasn't very big. The group of people lined up in a long line and walked towards the cave obediently. After a while, the person in the lead had already arrived outside the cave. You should have already seen what happened to those who ran away earlier. So, behave yourselves and go in by yourselves. Maybe the demon master will be merciful and give you a quick death. The middle-aged man stood at the entrance of the cave, looking at the group of people behind him with a gloomy face. The fatty at the front of the line could no longer bear it. He directly lifted his leg and rushed in. After all these few days, he had almost been driven crazy by the fear of death. At this time, he could finally be free. On the contrary, the faces of the people at the back of the line were somewhat uncertain. The more time passed, the more fear they felt in their hearts. The further behind the line, the weaker their psychological defenses. In the blink of an eye, more than a dozen people had already walked into the cave. Just as the rest of the people were about to enter, a roar suddenly came from the cave. Rip, roar, within the cave, a series of beast-like roars could be heard. The sound was horrifying, one after another. This sound did not sound like the screams of the people who had gone in earlier. It was more like an unknown beast. Roars could be heard incessantly. Outside the cave, many people's faces were already pale. This voice was simply too horrifying. What was that sound? What kind of monster is inside? Many people already had long faces. His heart, which was originally seeking relief, was now frightened again. Roar, 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 within the cave, the roars continued. The faces of the people outside were deathly pale. Don't move, don't move. The middle-aged man stood at the entrance of the cave, trying his best to control the crowd, afraid that they would riot. Unfortunately, those people had completely lost their minds, and began to scatter in all directions above the ravine. Unlike in the past, when they escaped from the valley this time, they were not affected by any power. The group of people easily escaped from the valley. Some of them even began to hide. This was their only hope of escape. Demon Master, after the middle-aged man forcibly grabbed a few people, he roared into the cave. Usually, he had never encountered such a situation. This time, he panicked and did not know what to do. "Demon Master, are you all right?" The middle-aged man continued to shout into the cave. However, there was still silence in the cave. The middle-aged man and another young man looked at each other. "Why don't we go in and take a look?" The young man's face showed a troubled expression. The middle-aged man snorted coldly and said, "These people have run away. You and I can't escape the responsibility. Why don't you hurry in and take a look?" his voice carried a hint of threat. Just as he said, this bloodthirsty demon master's personality was extremely eccentric and violent. If they were not careful and let these people escape, without the nourishment, it was very likely that he would vent his anger on them in a fit of rage. It was scary just thinking about it. The young man thought about it again and again in his heart, but still carefully walked into the cave. And the puppet butterfly controlled by Fang Yu had already entered the cave at this time. In the cave, it was still a dusky scene. Moreover, the stone walls of the entire cave had already been irrigated with scarlet blood. Although there was no sense of smell, just by looking at this scene, one could clearly feel that the smell of blood was definitely overwhelming here. The butterfly flew slowly, and the space in the cave also gradually expanded. After coming out of this side of the passage, the scene in the cave immediately made Fang Yu suck in a breath of cold air. Even though he was separated by the puppet butterfly and not personally experiencing it, Fang Yu still almost vomited. In the cave, to be precise, there were all kinds of broken limbs floating in the pool of blood. All kinds of internal organs floated in the pool of blood, and some had already changed color. Even though he had seen the scene of corpses and bones in the space of the immortal demon cave, Fang Yu still could not help it at this time. In the pool of blood, other than the broken limbs floating around, all kinds of corpses and bones were soaking in it, and it was already scarlet red. And the fatty who had just walked in, at this time, only had half of his body left floating in the pool of blood. His upper body had already disappeared without a trace. From the looks of it, he had not been completely devoured yet. And in the very center of the pool of corpses and bones, there was a person sitting upright at this time. To be precise, it was a bloody person. That person was dripping wet from head to toe, soaking in the pool of blood. His entire body was already scarlet red. His head was drooping, and his long hair draped over his shoulders was also blood-red. His long blood-red hair covered his entire head. Although his current expression could not be seen clearly at this time, from far away, one could clearly feel the evil aura on this fellow. This person's aura was very strange. Amidst the strangeness, there was some berserk evil aura. This kind of evil aura was already not something that ordinary people could have. It was more like the aura emitted from a wild beast. An unconcealable evil aura erupted from such a body, making one feel very uncomfortable. Even from so far away, Fang Yu could also feel this person's murderous intent that filled the sky. Very clearly, this fellow should be the ruler of this independent space. Bloodthirsty demon master. However, through the puppet butterfly, Fang Yu could feel it. The aura on this bloodthirsty demon master was seriously too strange. He was neither human nor demon. It did not seem like a living creature that should exist in this world. Chapter 655. The bloodthirsty cultivation method was also in the forbidden section of the Void Sacred Manual. But at that time, Fang Yu only had a rough look and felt that this cultivation method was really too bloody, so he decisively gave up in the end. But Fang Yu knew. People who cultivated this cultivation method had a very chaotic aura in their body. Not only was it cold, but it was also demonic. Although it was very strange, one could still clearly feel that monstrous demonic aura. However, Fang Yu did not feel a strong cold aura from this bloodthirsty demon master. In other words, there was something wrong with the bloodthirsty cultivation method that this guy cultivated. He cultivated it wrongly. Not only that, looking at his appearance, it seemed that he was suffering from the backlash of the cold aura of that cultivation method. Those beast-like roars just now were the pain caused by the aura when it devoured him. Once the bloodthirsty cultivation method was cultivated, one would become an existence that was neither human nor demon. Moreover, if the cultivation was wrong, then what would become of him? Fang Yu would not know. Outside the cave, that young man had already carefully walked in. When he saw the scene in the cave, he was instantly taken aback. Both eyes stared closely at the sea of blood in front of him. His eyes looked around, and then fixed on the bloodthirsty demon master. Demon master! His whole body trembled involuntarily. After a long while, he slowly opened his mouth to speak. And the bloodthirsty demon master in the blood pool did not seem to hear him, and did not have the intention to pay attention to him. Demon master, are you okay? After a long while, he once again gathered his courage and asked. Roar! This time, there was finally some movement from the bloodthirsty demon master who was sitting in the blood pool. He let out a beast-like roar. Then, that scarlet hair moved slightly, revealing an extremely strange face. No nose. No ears. It only had 2 sharp fangs. Above the fangs, in the 2 empty eye sockets, there were no eyeballs. On the 2 fangs, there was a pungent smell of blood. This appearance was really somewhat horrifying. However, when he raised his head, there was no intention of exploding. The empty eye sockets were aimed at the young man, as if they could see him clearly. After sizing up the young man for a while, he said in a low voice, "You've worked hard for me all these years." A word of thanks, coming from this body, was a little out of place. The young man didn't dare to think too much about it and hurriedly shook his head. "It's no trouble at all. It's my duty to serve the demon master." As the young man spoke, he couldn't help but step back. After all, the scene here was too frightening. He didn't want to stay any longer. "That's great." Bloodthirsty demon master snorted coldly, followed by a beast-like roar. He once again turned his empty eyes to the young man and said, "Call them all over. I have something to tell them." After saying that, he lowered his head again and stopped talking. The young man naturally didn't dare to stay any longer and hurriedly retreated from the cave. Not long after, he walked in from outside the cave. There were 6 more people behind him. Fong Yu recognized all of them. They were the people who were in charge of watching over them after they were teleported to the blood swamp. They carefully walked into the cave. After entering, the young man was still all right. After all, he was already mentally prepared. But it was different for the 6 of them. They were directly frightened by the scene in front of them. "Demon Master," the few of them called out in a trembling voice. Bloodthirsty Demon Master nodded. Those empty eye sockets were aimed at the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man couldn't help but be shocked. Seeing Bloodthirsty Demon Master's ghostly appearance, he couldn't accept it. He swallowed his saliva and asked shakily, "Demon Master, how did you become like this? What's wrong?" Bloodthirsty Demon Master's eyes moved slightly. Even without eyes, the middle-aged man could still clearly feel the hostility in those eyes. "Nothing, nothing." He hurriedly shook his head and didn't dare to say anything. "The few of you have all been in my blood demon sect for many years. Ever since I went into seclusion to cultivate the bloodthirsty mental cultivation technique, you have all been working hard for me. I'm very satisfied with this." Bloodthirsty Demon Master's low voice sounded in the cave. His voice was hoarse but very powerful. Hearing this, Fong Yu finally understood. No wonder Bloodthirsty Demon Master had the ability to find so many experts, even peak martial emperors, to work for him. It turned out that they were all from the Blood Demon sect, and this Bloodthirsty Demon Master should have been their master in the past. Fong Yu had heard of the Blood Demon sect. The top 10 sects in the Shire state still existed to this day. However, the Blood Demon sect was not the same as the other sections. They never relied on any family, nor did they ally with any forces. Because they were strong enough on their own. The reason for their strength was also very simple. Their sect had hundreds of taboo cultivation techniques. All the elders knew a thing or two about them. All these years, the Blood Demon sect was an existence that no one dared to provoke in the Shire state. However, although the cultivation techniques they cultivated were taboo, they were not as bloody and inhumane as bloodthirsty demon masters. A few years ago, It was said that an elder of the blood demon sect mysteriously disappeared with a group of disciples. After all, a taboo cultivation technique disappeared with them. Presumably, it was bloodthirsty demon master. And that taboo cultivation technique that disappeared should be the bloodthirsty mantra that he cultivated. However, it seemed that his cultivation method was not quite right, which was why he ended up like this. Serving the demon master is nothing, the middle-aged man said with a fake smile. For some reason, he sensed a bad taste in bloodthirsty demon master's words. After all, they were all disciples of bloodthirsty demon master, so they had some understanding of him. Bloodthirsty demon master had always been eccentric and would not be courteous to them at all. I couldn't tell that you guys are quite loyal, bloodthirsty demon master sneered. His voice was already extremely hoarse. Demon master, you said you needed us for something. May I know what it is? The middle-aged man was already starting to feel uneasy. He was not very comfortable in this kind of place, so he simply plucked up the courage to ask. Oh, it's nothing major. Bloodthirsty demon master did not seem to be angry when he heard this. He only shook his bright red head slightly and said slowly. Then, he continued, it's been several decades since I cultivated the bloodthirsty mantra. In these few decades, I've been nourished by all kinds of nutrients, and my strength has increased quite a bit. However, I seem to have encountered some bottlenecks recently. I've finally found the reason for this bottleneck. The realm power of the nutrients is too low. If I want to continue to advance, I urgently need nutrients for a stronger realm. Bloodthirsty demon master's words slowly traveled into the ears of everyone in the cave. Chapter 656. Nourishment for a Stronger Cultivation Realm? The middle-aged man frowned and turned to look at the others, who were also looking at each other in confusion. Demon Master, you mean that we need martial royal realm experts later? The middle-aged man asked carefully. That's right. The bloodthirsty demon master had no intention of hiding it. He nodded again and said, not only martial royal realm, but also the peak of martial royal realm. It's best if they are martial honored realm experts, just like that guy last time. The bloodthirsty demon master's voice was still so low. These words came out of his mouth so casually that it was not even worth mentioning. However, the middle-aged man and the others looked troubled. He looked at the bloodthirsty demon master and said, Demon Master, we are slow and not strong. It will be difficult to trick a martial royal realm expert into coming in. The martial honored realm expert from last time also came in unintentionally. The middle-aged man voiced out the confusion in his heart. Just as he said, they did not have absolute confidence in tricking a martial royal realm expert into coming in. Moreover, there were martial honored realm experts. When one's strength reached that level, the so-called opportunity in Desolate City Mountain was not worth mentioning in their eyes. Moreover, the two martial royal realm disciples outside could not withstand the teleportation array of a large number of martial royal realm experts. After voicing out all the doubts in his heart, he looked at the strange head of the bloodthirsty demon master and revealed a look of concern in his eyes. You're very thoughtful. The bloodthirsty demon master nodded and said, I've already thought of what you can think of. However, I have a way. The bloodthirsty demon master nodded, as if he was very confident. Please speak frankly, demon master. The middle-aged man said. Just now, you said that it's only right for you to work for me. Now, since you can't find more experts, then there's no use for you. Aren't you loyal? Then this time, I'll borrow your lives for a bit. The bloodthirsty demon master's words were spoken in a carefree manner. Especially the last sentence, it was a reasonable reply. His tone was extremely cold, without the slightest bit of emotion. What? Demon Master, what did you say? Everyone, including the middle-aged man, was dumbfounded. Was he going to burn the bridge after crossing the river after using them? They had already followed the bloodthirsty demon master for several decades, starting from the blood demon sect. Even when he betrayed his sect, they followed him closely. Who would have thought that the bloodthirsty demon master would actually say such words? The middle-aged man couldn't believe his ears. He looked at the bloodthirsty demon lord and said, "Demon lord, we have followed you for many years. Even if there wasn't any merit, there was still hard work. How can you tear me down after crossing the river?" Bang, bang, bang. However, just as the middle-aged man was halfway through his words, the bloodthirsty demon master's scarlet fists had already exploded with a bloodthirsty aura. This aura directly condensed into a pillar of blood that soared into the sky. The pillar of blood pierced through the middle-aged man's body. In the next second, his entire body exploded. When the blood gushed out, the bloodthirsty demon master disappeared from where he stood in an instant, as though a drought had met with sweet dew. Those two terrifying fangs directly penetrated the middle-aged man's body. The blood was being devoured crazily. After a long while, the bloodthirsty demon master nodded in satisfaction. The flesh of a peak martial dominator is much better than the flesh of a martial emperor. As he spoke, there were still waves of boiling blood dripping from those two fangs. The demon master has gone mad. He has already lost his humanity. To think that we have followed him for so long, and he treats us like this. Anyway, we will die sooner or later. Let's fight it out with him. The few young men behind the middle-aged man immediately reacted. The bloodthirsty demon master in front of them was no longer their former master. After devouring so much blood, this guy had already completely lost his humanity. The middle-aged man was his former personal disciple. He actually swallowed it without even blinking an eye. Although he didn't have eyeballs, however, these people knew in their hearts that this guy was no longer human nor ghost. Rather than waiting for death, they might as well fight it out with him. Perhaps there was still a chance of survival. Fight it out with him, the young man reminded. The few people behind him also didn't hesitate. From the looks of it, the bloodthirsty demon master didn't intend to let them go. Therefore, the few of them didn't hesitate. A violent aura erupted from their bodies, and they directly attacked. The power condensed by the 6 of them was already considered violent. The cultivation of a peak martial emperor was enough to shake a mountain. The power of the 6 of them had already condensed in midair. Then, it directly blasted toward the bloodthirsty demon master. Boom, boom, boom. The huge force directly shook this side of the cave. The powerful force directly entered the bloodthirsty demon master's head. The bloodthirsty demon master had no intention of dodging at all. He just allowed this force to enter his head. Huff, huff, huff. A moment later, the aftermath of this force completely disappeared from this side of the world. However, the bloodthirsty demon master, who was hit by this force, didn't show any abnormalities. He still sat quietly in the same place, not moving at all. The combined attack of 6 peak martial emperor experts, even the dragon armor on Fang Yu's body couldn't withstand it. Moreover, the bloodthirsty demon master didn't rely on any techniques or treasures. Just like that, he took the full brunt of the violent blow, unscathed. Not only that, through the puppet butterfly, Fang Yu could also clearly feel that a strange twisting force had just erupted from the bloodthirsty demon master's body. He actually directly swallowed this force. Moreover, it didn't take much effort. The 6 peak martial emperor experts were so insignificant in front of him. Not only that, his terrifying head turned slightly, and then directly grabbed at the void toward one of the young men. In that scarlet blood pool, an obscure force instantly erupted. This force instantly enveloped the young man. Then, that blood pillar directly penetrated the young man's body. Just like the previous middle-aged man. This person, after being penetrated by the blood pillar, his entire body seemed to have suffered a violent impact. Starting from his lower abdomen, cracks began to appear. Then, at a speed visible to the naked eye, it directly cracked open. This guy has already mastered the bloodthirsty technique. Ordinary strength is useless against him. Seeing this scene, the remaining few people immediately reacted. At this time, the bloodthirsty demon master was no longer an existence of an ordinary cultivator. Not a demon, let alone a human. No cultivation technique would be of any use to him. Brute force couldn't cause any harm to him. On the contrary, it would be continuously devoured by him. Once he devoured this force, the bloodthirsty demon master's strength would become stronger and stronger. It could be said that this guy was an existence that couldn't be killed. Chapter 657. Before the bloodthirsty demon master cultivated the bloodthirsty cultivation technique, his strength had already reached the peak of the martial emperor realm. Now, with the passage of time and the passing of decades, coupled with a terrifying cultivation technique like the bloodthirsty cultivation technique, the bloodthirsty demon master's current strength was already unimaginable. Moreover, he was now like an unkillable existence, immune to all powers. For some reason, his strength was still increasing in the blood sea. Power of concept. After a while, one of the young men finally managed to react. He stared at the bloodthirsty demon master in front of him and muttered, "This blood pool is full of power of concept, and he's still absorbing it." The young man's words reminded everyone, including Fong Yu, who was controlling the puppet butterfly. No wonder there were so many strange powers in the blood sea, and they were still being digested by the bloodthirsty demon master. It turned out that the true power of concept was in the blood sea. All these years, he had not completely devoured it. It could be said that as long as he was in the blood sea, his power of concept was an endless existence. Not bad, you're smart after all, worthy of being my disciples. The bloodthirsty demon master had no intention of hiding. His two slender and sharp fangs shook as he revealed an extremely bleak smile. The eye sockets without eyeballs shook as he stared at the people in front of him. "I advise you not to resist anymore. I'll give you a quick death. Dying for me can be considered as your loyalty. In the future, I'll rule this world, and it'll all be due to your contributions." Ha ha! The bloodthirsty demon master had completely lost his mind. He did not treat the people in front of him as his disciples at all, but as moving nutrients. "Stop talking nonsense, go to hell." One of the young men had already reacted. The bloodthirsty demon master would not let them go. Rather than waiting for death, they might as well give it their all. Moreover, they had already found the bloodthirsty demon master's weakness. The blood pool. The bloodthirsty demon master's body had already merged with the blood pool. Even a martial honored realm elite would not be able to hurt him. However, the blood pool was different. It could be said to be the lifeline of the bloodthirsty demon master. Boom, boom, boom. A few of them reacted quickly. They raised their hands and formed seals. Surging power poured into their fists and bombarded the blood pool. Only the power of intent could break this blood pool. However, to their surprise, no matter how violent their powers were when they intersected. However, when it hit the blood pool, it was as if it had sunk into sand. The violent energy was completely devoured by the gloomy and obscure aura in the blood pool. In just the blink of an eye, this power was completely devoured. Ice-sealing throne. Seeing that the power of concept could not suppress the bloodthirsty demon master in the slightest, they changed their strategy once again. The frozen throne. It was a gigantic spirit beast. The spirit beast's body was overflowing with demonic green light. A bright light appeared and instantly enveloped the entire space. Then, the entire cave was suddenly covered in frost. Frost rose everywhere as if it wanted to freeze everything in this world. The cave, which had been filled with blood and slaughter, immediately fell into a world of ice and snow. Even those young people felt as if they were in an ice cellar. Huff, 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 a cold gust of wind suddenly blew, sweeping through the cave. The target was the scarlet blood pool. A thin layer of ice mist began to wantonly pervade the blood pool. The scarlet, boiling blood pool was now covered in a faint layer of frost. Your throne has been cultivated quite well. Seeing the blood pool slowly freezing, the bloodthirsty demon master was not shocked. His eyeless eye sockets turned around and aimed at the huge figure in midair. But don't forget, I was the one who gave you this demonic beast back then. The bloodthirsty demon master laughed maniacally. In the next second, his thin, withered claws suddenly grabbed in the direction of the shadow. A thick and pungent smell of blood instantly flooded the entire virtual shadow. Then, the shadow gradually dimmed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Finally, the entire shadow was fragmented and scattered in all directions. Pucci, the young man who had condensed the throne, also spat out a mouthful of blood mist. They were different from Feng Yu. The throne was inextricably linked to the main body. Once the throne was severely damaged, the main body would also be affected. Young man, your realm power has completely collapsed, and your divine soul has also been severely damaged. If not for the nourishment of a heavenly treasure like Feng Yu, you would most likely be a cripple in your next life. In the blink of an eye, several people fell to the ground. The remaining 4 people also looked at each other, not knowing what to do. Stay here obediently, and I'll give you a quick death. The bloodthirsty demon master sneered sinisterly. After devouring the flesh of the severely injured young man, he once again returned to the blood pool. Don't talk nonsense with him, let's attack together. The remaining people snorted coldly, their faces solemn. Looking at each other, the few of them attacked again. Powerful auras shrouded, surrounding the bloodthirsty demon master from all 4 directions, and began to attack wildly. Huge waves set off a patch of scarlet in the blood pool, and the aftermath of the violent power bombarded the cave until it was on the verge of collapse. The 4 of them working together was simply tickling the bloodthirsty demon master. He just sat in the blood pool, allowing the 4 people to attack him violently. Every bit of power was devoured by him without holding back, and the 4 people who were attacking him with all their might were already sweating profusely, their faces full of anxiety. Why do you have to waste your efforts like this? The bloodthirsty demon master snorted coldly. His withered claws casually grabbed one of them, instantly tearing him apart. Fresh blood poured down, and the scene was too bloody. Profound meaning, however, when the bloodthirsty demon master was still engrossed in devouring this nourishment, a low voice suddenly sounded by his ear. Who? He suddenly came back to his senses, and that strange head was pointed straight in the direction of the outside of the cave. However, at this time, a burst of light had already appeared above the bloodthirsty demon master's head. It was the phantom image of a huge chessboard. In the chessboard, threads of mysterious power that changed the cycle of reincarnation were swimming wildly. That power seemed to be able to devour everything. The abyss-like violent power instantly swallowed the bloodthirsty demon master. In the next second, a pillar of light suddenly gushed out. Feng Yu had made his move. After so many days of recuperation in the 8 desolate secret land, his injuries had completely recovered. Not only that, but through the puppet butterfly, he had already observed the bloodthirsty demon master's weakness. On the surface, this guy was invulnerable, and no power or concept was a match for him. In fact, that was indeed the case. These youths were all peak martial monarchs, not weak at all. Chapter 658. However, even with so many martial emperors joining forces, they were not worth mentioning in his eyes. Having this blood pool was like having everything. It could be said that he was invincible. Not only that, ordinary power would be devoured by him and turned into his own. This was very similar to the demon's son, who could devour everything in the Battle of the 100. However, that was just a more ordinary cultivation technique. As for the bloodthirsty demon master, This was the bloodthirsty cultivation technique. Fang Yu carefully observed the bloodthirsty demon master's every move, but he could not find a flaw. Just as he was thinking hard, the strange power on his body suddenly appeared when the bloodthirsty demon master devoured the flesh and blood. It was a chaotic and gloomy power. Obviously, it was caused by the bloodthirsty demon master's cultivation mistake. Previously, Fang Yu was not sure. This time, when he saw the bloodthirsty demon master devouring the nourishment again, the chaotic energy in his body appeared once again. Fang Yu found the right time, taking advantage of the time when this power included the bloodthirsty demon master, and directly stepped out of the 8 desolate secret territory. The power of the ancient chessboard directly surrounded the bloodthirsty demon master. In the chessboard, it contained the power of the profound meaning of change, not human power, nor cultivation technique. That was the profound meaning of natural reincarnation between heaven and earth. Whether it was the bloodthirsty demon master, martial emperor or martial venerable, none of them could try to devour this profound meaning of change. They could only resist it head-on. Boom! The moment the bloodthirsty demon master reacted, he was already completely enveloped by the huge chessboard shadow. After being enveloped by the light pillar, the lower half of the bloodthirsty demon master's body was slowly sucked into the chessboard. He wanted to resist, and with the help of the blood pool, he had enough strength to resist. Just like Supervisor Lei in Tianluo City, he could burn the power of conception and forcefully break through. However, he had just finished devouring the nourishment. The aura in his body was chaotic. The yin qi and the strange evil qi were raging. This made him unable to use his cultivation technique. After a period of time, his body would recover. This was also after he finished devouring the middle-aged man for a long time before continuing to attack. Every time he finished devouring, he would sit quietly in the blood pool to stall for time. Once he recovered, he would continue to attack. And these young people, who were also his disciples, clearly did not understand the situation. If Fang Yu hadn't appeared, they might have been devoured by the bloodthirsty demon master one by one. Fang Yu was already extremely proficient in using the ancient chess game's profound meaning. Afraid that the chessboard's power wasn't enough to devour the bloodthirsty demon master, Fang Yu once again strengthened his power of concept. However, this power of concept was not directed at the bloodthirsty demon master, but at the pool of blood below him. That place was still scarlet red. However, Fang Yu could already tell that it was the source of all his power. As long as he was in the blood pool, any kind of power would be useless against him. Therefore, when he finished devouring a person and his aura became chaotic, he would immediately hide in the blood pool and allow others to attack him without any harm. It could be said that this blood pool had become one of his thrones. There was a close connection between the blood pool and the body. Now, his entire person was enveloped by the power of the ancient chess game. The chaotic aura that constantly appeared in his body caused him to have no way of connecting to the power of the blood pool at all. Just in case, Fang Yu bombarded that blood pool with all his power of concept. Rumble, a series of dull, loud noises. A bloody mist immediately surged in the blood pool. In the surroundings, the smell of blood became even stronger. Fortunately, Fang Yu was already mentally prepared in advance. That was why there was no chaos. Succeeding in one strike, Fang Yu retracted his gaze. In midair, the bloodthirsty demon master's body was already completely devoured by the chessboard's power. Only when his figure completely disappeared from the chessboard did Fang Yu let out a sigh of relief. The bloodthirsty demon master failed miserably just like that. With his strength, Fang Yu naturally couldn't possibly take him into the ancient chess game right now. It was just a pity that the bloodthirsty mantra he cultivated wasn't quite right. There were seriously too many weaknesses, and this bloodthirsty demon master, if he couldn't break out of the game, could only forever be immersed in the profound meaning of reincarnation. Of course, even if he was lucky enough to break out of the game, Then, that crazily flowing power of the profound meaning of reincarnation in the chessboard could also bombard all the strength in his body. In the end, if he was lucky enough to come out, he would only be a mortal. If he was lucky, he could start all over again. If he was unlucky and damaged the foundation of his divine soul, then he could only be a cripple for life. What a powerful power! What the hell is this? How can it be so powerful? That demon, how did he get devoured? Seeing the bloodthirsty demon master slowly disappear in midair, those few youngsters were already stunned. There were only 3 of them left, and at this time, their faces were all filled with shock. No one noticed where Fang Yu came from at all. After all, the 3 of them had just taken a trip out of fear. "Brother, thank you very much." One of the youngsters stepped forward and bowed respectfully, as if he was greeting a benefactor. The remaining 2 also hurriedly bowed and thanked him. Fang Yu nodded very naturally. After all, he was the one who took action to save the 3 of them. "Now I've settled the score with all of you. After all, the 3 of you have already thanked me, and your attitudes are quite sincere." Fang Yu raised his eyebrows and looked at the 3 of them as he stood at the side and said, "What do you mean?" The 3 of them were stunned at the same time, and their eyes were filled with puzzlement. "Nothing. I'm just settling the score with all of you." Fang Yu smiled and shook his head, saying, "Your memory can't be that bad, right? If this bloodthirsty demon master hadn't gone crazy, I'm sure I would have been devoured by him as nourishment by now, right? What this? I have to thank all of you for tricking me to this godforsaken place and wasting so much of my time." Fang Yu's gloomy tone rang in their ears. The 3 of them twitched all over for no reason, and their faces changed. An ominous premonition had already enveloped their hearts. "What are you trying to do?" The moment the 3 of them moved at the same time, the power of the ultimacy of reincarnation of the ancient chessboard had already devoured all 3 of them. "Nothing much. I'll send you to play chess with the bloodthirsty demon master." Fang Yu's cold voice rang in their ears. In the next second, their bodies were already devoured by the mysterious power of the ancient chessboard. These people were all injured in the battle with the bloodthirsty demon master. Therefore, Fang Yu was 100% sure that he could easily take down these guys. And the truth was so. The 3 of them didn't have the slightest ability to resist. Even though they were already peak martial emperors, they could only let the power of the ancient chessboard slowly devour them because of their serious injuries. After doing all this, Fang Yu took back the ancient chessboard. He slowly heaved a sigh of relief. Chapter 659. For some reason, the power of these 2 ancient chess games was a bit strange. Perhaps it was because it was in this independent space. Or perhaps it was because of this strange place, the bloodthirsty demon master. The power of the ancient chess game, released these 2 times, was incomparably powerful. It even exceeded Fang Yu's imagination. However, Fang Yu didn't know whether to be happy or worried about the power of the ancient chess game becoming stronger. Because when he released the ancient chess game just now, he could clearly feel that the power of reincarnation that was crazily rotating in the ancient chess game was consuming the spiritual energy in Fang Yu's Qi at a terrifying speed. In just 2 releases, more than half of the spiritual energy in Fang Yu's Qi was devoured. It could be said that if he wasn't 100% sure, once he released the power of the ancient chess game and failed, then Fang Yu would only have a dead end. The remaining spiritual energy was not enough to support him to do anything. He couldn't even open the 8 desolate secret realm. In the past, such a situation did not occur. This made Fang Yu somewhat difficult to accept. If the ancient chess game really became like this, then in the future, wouldn't this killing move not be used as a last resort? Thinking about it gave him a headache. But a moment later, Fang Yu was relieved. The power of the Throne of Sin was obviously more satisfying than the ancient chess game. However, this throne of sin had been in his body for a while, and he had not really used it yet. It could be said that the throne of sin had not been developed at all. The 3 moves of the heavens will wandering dragon extinction were also great killing move. However, this method was a bit troublesome, and Fang Yu did not want to use it at all. Now, the power of the ancient chess game that he could rely on could not be used casually. Although he was not used to it, it was also a good thing. Thinking about it, it might be because he had devoured a little too many people recently, and it had seriously exceeded the limit. And the profound meaning of reincarnation in the ancient chess game, every additional person would consume more. Unable to think clearly, Fang Yu directly returned to the 8 desolate secret realm. In his body, the power of the spirit congealing pill played a role and began to frantically devour the rich spiritual energy in the 8 desolate secret realm. In just a few days, the spiritual energy in his chi si had been replenished. Walking out of the 8 desolate secret zone, Fang Yu frowned. Outside, only a few hours had passed. However, this was still the heart-devouring valley, the bloodthirsty devil master's space. This also meant that the bloodthirsty demon master was still immersed in the eternal chess game, and had not died. As long as he didn't die, the independent space he condensed would naturally not disappear. Fang Yu frowned as he stood in the middle of the canyon. It seemed that there were only 3 ways to get out of this independent space. The first was to obtain the bloodthirsty demon master's approval. The second was to exterminate the bloodthirsty demon master. Fang Yu immediately ruled out these 2 options. Only those who had broken the ancient chessboard would be able to escape from it. Otherwise, no one would be able to help him. Even Fang Yu couldn't do anything about it. Now, there was only one way to get out of this space. Fang Yu had used this method once before, but he didn't have absolute confidence. In the last 100-person battle, in that canyon, the fiend son of the fiend race used the remnants of the ancient chessboard to devour Fang Yu. Although that wasn't the true power of the ancient chessboard. However, it was still somewhat similar to this independent space. This place couldn't compare to the 8 desolate secret zone. Just now, Fang Yu had already observed it. This place wasn't like the 8 desolate secret zone, where it could be scaled infinitely and was so big that it had no boundaries. This was merely a small space. Previously, with the bloodthirsty demon master holding down the fort, this place couldn't be broken through. But at this time, the bloodthirsty demon master was already in that endless chess game. There was naturally no suppression of any power here. With that thought, Fang Yu directly communicated with the power of the sovereign that faintly appeared in his Dantian Chi Si. Fortunately, after the damaged Dantian Chi Si was completely repaired, the power of the throne of sin had already emerged. With just a slight attempt, Fang Yu had already communicated with the throne of sin. Rumble, in the next second, a huge figure suddenly appeared. The throne of sin condensed behind Fang Yu. The moment the throne of sin condensed, Fang Yu instilled all the power of the Dantian Chi Si into the body of the throne of sin. Rumble, the huge black shadow of the throne of sin began to shake violently. This part of the world immediately began to collapse. In a moment, the figure of the throne of sin had already completely enveloped this space. It seemed to have reached the horizon and couldn't continue to expand. Break! Fang Yu roared and once again instilled the power of concept into the body of the throne of sin. Bang! The moment his voice fell, the body of the throne of sin instantly increased by more than 3 times. This space also seemed to be unable to withstand the weight of the throne of sin and collapsed with a loud bang. Pieces of gravel danced in the wind. And above the throne of sin, a distorted space had already appeared. This space node had already been shattered. Fang Yu no longer hesitated and rushed directly into the distorted space in a flash. The moment he stepped into the distorted space, Fang Yu felt an aura coming from behind him. Several figures followed closely behind, as if they were afraid of falling behind. Fang Yu sneered and didn't care about them. Those people, like Fang Yu, were tricked into this independent space created by the bloodthirsty demon master. Previously, taking advantage of the bloodthirsty demon master's madness, they were quick to hide. Now that they saw Fang Yu, it was naturally as if they saw their savior. What's more, Fang Yu directly shattered this seemingly unbreakable space in front of them. The shock in their hearts was self-evident. The power of the space distortion didn't last for long. This time, Fang Yu finally understood the benefits of the realm. With the power of the realm protecting him, the power of the space distortion was like an ant gnawing on him, unable to cause any harm at all. A moment later, the power of the space distortion began to slowly weaken. In front of him, a white light finally replaced the grayish-scarlet color. This was a mountain peak. Below his feet was a swamp. Beside the swamp was a piece of soil. Fang Yu greedily breathed in the surrounding air. Pure and fresh, the white light in front of him completely replaced the original dusk. Breathing in and out, it was no longer the thick, pungent, and nauseating smell of blood. The few people who followed behind him out of the teleportation seemed to have been reborn at this time, their faces full of smiles. Desolate City Mountain. This is Desolate City Mountain. Several people shouted excitedly. Those who survived a great disaster were destined for good fortune, compared to those who had been used as nourishment by the bloodthirsty demon master. Not only did they escape a disaster, but they also successfully arrived at Desolate City Mountain. The opportunities on Desolate City Mountain were very important to them. Chapter 660. They would never change. Fang Yu calmly stared at the figures of these people. He sneered in his heart. After being reborn, not only did they not realize anything, they were still stubborn. Fang Yu did not know what the opportunity of Mount Desolate City was, but he knew that it was just a lie made up by the disciples of the bloodthirsty demon master to deceive outsiders. As for whether they believed it or not, Fang Yu had no intention to stop them. People with different principles could not work together. Fang Yu's goal was not the so-called fortuitous encounters here. At this moment, his gaze had already landed on the soft, muddy ground beside the swamp. The yellow mud here was a good material for making high-grade brick kilns. Fang Yu had planned to give up, but now it was right in front of him. Wouldn't it be a waste if he did not take it? After packing up the yellow mud, Fang Yu went directly from the foot of Mount Desolate City to a dense forest. An hour later, he appeared in a dense forest. In front of him was the so-called entrance to Mount Desolate City. The so-called statue was still there, and the two peak martial emperors were still standing on the statue looking down on the world. Under the statue, the new batch of people who wanted to enter Mount Desolate City to seek opportunities had already lined up and started to go through the statue's test. This scene seemed as if it had just happened. At that time, Fang Yu did not know where they would go after passing the statue's test. He also did not know that the so-called trial was just to test whether they were qualified to become the nourishment of the bloodthirsty demon master. Seeing the joy on the faces of those who had already passed the trial, Fang Yu couldn't help but find it funny. And those who had turned into blood mist, they were lucky that they did not have to go in and face the endless fear. Last time, Fang Yu participated in the test like a fool. This time, he did not continue to participate in the test because he had nothing to do. The reason why he came here was, of course, not to stop those who wanted to enter Mount Desolate City to seek the so-called opportunity. He was not that kind. He came here only for revenge. First, to avenge the sneak attack on him during the statue's test. Secondly, he wanted to take revenge on them for tricking Fang Yu. There was nothing much to say. Fang Yu directly attacked. Naturally, Fang Yu did not have much confidence in facing two experts at the peak of the martial royal realm at the same time. However, Fang Yu was very good at sneak attacking. The third move of the Sky Will Dragon Slayer was unleashed. In midair, a dense number of fist shadows had already condensed. In the next second, the fist shadows condensed into a violent iron fist. His target was the other peak martial emperor on the statue. Fang Yu naturally did not dare to be careless when dealing with two powerhouses at the peak of the martial emperor realm. After all, in terms of cultivation level, he was already suppressed by several levels. The soaring dragon technique had already reached its limit. Fang Yu's figure was already as fast as lightning. Before anyone could react, the ghostly figure had already appeared beside one of them. That person's expression changed slightly when he sensed a powerful aura. His reaction was not slow. Unfortunately, all of his attention was on the people taking the test below, so he didn't have any defense at all. Boom! By the time he reacted, he was still a step too late. The bull-sized iron fist, accompanied by a tearing wind, had already bombarded the vital part of his throat. The aura on his body had not completely burst out, and his entire figure had already been sent flying backward. Sin thrown. Successful in one strike, Fang Yu did not hesitate at all. Sin thrown directly condensed. A huge shadow, accompanied by a violent power of conception. The strength of Sin thrown was already at the demon royal realm, comparable to the peak of the martial royal realm. Coupled with Fang Yu's violent power of conception. As soon as he attacked, there was a burst of violent power. The target was the expert on the other side of the statue. At this moment, he was obviously on guard. In the instant that person was sent flying, his berserk aura had already swept over. The moment he saw Fang Yu, the expression on his face changed. How is this possible? He looked at Fang Yu and asked in a deep voice. Weren't you sent to the heart-devouring valley by you to be nourishment for the bloodthirsty demon master, right? Fang Yu looked at the other person on the statue with a heavy gaze. It was fine if he did not speak. Once he spoke, Fang Yu could be sure that it was this guy who had attacked Fang Yu during the statue test last time. Otherwise, he would not have remembered it so clearly. Impossible. The heart-devouring valley can only be entered but not exited. Those who enter alive will not be able to come out. Even martial venerables can't come out. How did you come out? His eyes were still filled with astonishment. Obviously, he did not quite believe the scene in front of him. So, you admit it? The so-called trial, the desolate city mountain, it's just an excuse to provide nourishment for the bloodthirsty demon master. Fang Yu sneered. This fellow had confessed without being pressed. Without needing Fang Yu to ask, he had already spilled the beans on his own. What? Nourishment? Heart-devouring valley? What is that place? Don't you understand? These two are liars. How dare you lie to us? Kill him. The conversation between Fang Yu and him was overheard by those who were still participating in the trial below. Many of them had realized that it was obviously a scam. At that moment, a few of them had already gathered together, planning to attack this peak martial emperor expert. So what if it is? Shouldn't it be your honor to become nourishment for the bloodthirsty demon master? What? You ants still want to make a move against me? Don't think that you can repeat the same trick after your successful sneak attack. If you're not afraid of death, then come at me. The middle-aged man harumphed coldly. A shocking murderous intent had already burst out from his eyes. This aura immediately intimidated those who were ready to attack below the statue. Although they had the advantage in numbers, under the suppression of absolute strength, they did not care at all. At that moment, many of them were already hesitating. Seeing this, the middle-aged man's gaze deepened and a smile appeared on his face. Nothing more than this. This smile was naturally directed at Fang Yu. Fang Yu was not moved at all. He did not intend to rely on the help of those below. The power of the evil throne's body, coupled with the powerful intent realm, suddenly bombarded. Bang! After a loud dull sound, a terrifying aura erupted from the middle-aged man's body. This aura directly enveloped his entire body. At the same time, a shocking force on his fists forcibly bombarded the power of the evil throne's body. Fang Yu had seen the power of the evil throne. It was enough to shake heaven and earth, full of destructive power. Chapter 661. Even so, this terrifying attack from the throne of sin. It was still forcefully blocked by this middle-aged man at the peak of the Emperor realm. Fang Yu was not surprised. After all, in a situation where their strength was equal, and he was prepared, it would not be easy to succeed. Is this all you've got? The middle-aged man sneered, and his gloomy gaze once again fell on Fang Yu's body. With this little bit of strength, it's not enough to kill me. The middle-aged man laughed wildly, and just as he was about to continue saying something, his eyes flashed. Fang Yu had actually disappeared. Fleeing without a fight? The middle-aged man frowned and began to release his perception. Fang Yu's aura had disappeared. There was some doubt in his eyes, but after a moment, he was relieved. For someone at Fang Yu's level, it would not cause any harm to him. After all, he had already succeeded, and it was time to run. If he was not a fool, he would not stay. He sneered in his heart and immediately relaxed his vigilance. However, he did not know that Fang Yu was indeed a fool. Profound meaning. The moment the middle-aged man let down his guard, a cold voice suddenly sounded in his ears. The moment this voice sounded in his ears, a strange force instantly wrapped around his entire body. The moment this force wrapped around him, he reacted. However, it was already too late. The moment the aura on his body erupted, the twisted power of the profound meaning of reincarnation in the eternal chessboard had already swallowed the middle-aged man's entire body into the shadow of the chessboard. In the eternal chessboard, there was once again one more person quietly in the chessboard. Seeing the middle-aged man's figure completely disappear in the chessboard, Fang Yu breathed a sigh of relief. This time, he was indeed gambling. Previously, the throne of sin had already consumed a lot of his spiritual energy. He was not sure if releasing the power of the eternal chessboard here would consume any spiritual energy. After all, the last time, it was in an independent space. If the spiritual energy consumed this time was no different from the last time he released the eternal chessboard, then, if this sneak attack did not succeed in one fell swoop, he would not even have a chance to escape. Although doing this was a gamble. However, Fang Yu also wanted to test if the ancient chessboard had really changed. The truth was that the ancient chessboard was indeed different. Unleashing the power of the ancient chess game had consumed more than half of the qi in his body. Fortunately, the middle-aged man was caught off guard and was hit. Otherwise, Fang Yu would be buried here today. Although this was a risky move, it gave Fang Yu some confidence in his heart. Damn, why is that power so strange? Why does that chess game have the power of the profound of heaven and earth? Below the statue, those people looked on in a daze. At this moment, they were all stunned on the spot. Especially when the violent power was released in the chessboard just now, all of them were dumbfounded. That sort of power originated from heaven and earth. Inadvertently, they felt as if they were being oppressed. It was no wonder that Fang Yu, who was only a mere martial king, dared to challenge two experts at the peak of the martial emperor realm. With this kind of power by his side, he had absolute confidence. After getting rid of this guy, Fang Yu felt relieved. Suddenly, a violent force gathered in his fists and directly bombarded the statue. The entire statue collapsed and turned into dust. This scam was completely over. As for the opportunity on Desolate City Mountain, it would be left to a fool to find it. Fang Yu sneered and left the Desolate City Mountain that reeked of blood. When he returned, Fang Yu did not alert anyone. At this moment, Tianluo City was empty. There was no one in the streets and alleys. The surroundings were so quiet that it made one's scalp tingle. Fang Yu released his perception and roughly sensed the surroundings. He did not find any strong aura. It seemed that no one had come to stock up today. This saved Fang Yu a lot of trouble. Following the way he came, Fang Yu walked into the dense forest. On the riverbank, a passenger ship had been waiting for a long time. The burly man was lying in the cabin at this moment. When he saw Fang Yu's figure, he breathed a sigh of relief. "Why are you only back now?" The burly man hurriedly got up and docked the ship. Then, he looked around and said, "I thought you wouldn't be back." Fang Yu was puzzled by the burly man's expression. He looked at him and asked, "Did something happen?" Looking at his vigilant expression, it seemed that something big had happened. "You don't know, but in the past few days, all the cities in Shire have been under martial law." The burly man looked around and motioned for Fang Yu to get on the ship. After getting on the ship, he hurriedly left the riverbank. "Oh!" Fang Yu frowned. "What do you mean?" The entire Shire had been under martial law. Something big must have happened. This kind of statewide martial law had never happened in Guizhou before. "I'm not sure what exactly happened. However, on the second day after sending you here, a few large families, a few large sects, and the governor of Shire declared martial law in the entire Shire," the burly man explained as he rowed the ship. Then, he continued, "Martial law is martial law. It's nothing to the locals of Shire. At most, we can't go out as we please. But for people like you who come from other states, it's not good news." When the burly man said this, he could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. Fang Yu did not say anything and motioned for the burly man to continue. The burly man shook his head. "In the past few days, especially in Quicksand City, it has been completely sealed off. Other than the locals of Shire, all outsiders have been captured. Many merchants from other places have been captured by the guards of Quicksand City and sent to Tiger's prison. Those who are lucky can still come out. Those who are unlucky will lose their lives. Those merchants are probably unlucky. I haven't seen anyone come out yet." The burly man sighed as he spoke. "Tiger's prison?" Fang Yu murmured. Fang Yu knew this place. He had heard Yi Chongxing mention it before. This Tiger's prison was the most terrifying prison in Shire. Most of the people locked up there were extremely vicious and evil people. Everyone was dripping with blood. Those who went in rarely came out alive. The inside was like a sandcastle. It was incomparably cruel. Did something happen in Shire? After pausing for a moment, Fang Yu asked in a low voice. "I don't know." The burly man shook his head honestly. His face was full of worry as he said, "I only know that many experts from the sects and families of Shire have gathered in Quicksand City recently. It seems that there's something big going on. I heard that it should be relatively easy for Shire to make a move." The burly man lowered his voice and whispered the last sentence into Fang Yu's ear. After he finished speaking, he looked around, as if afraid that someone would overhear him. Chapter 662. Attack Huaxia? Fang Yu frowned, a little shocked. Was Sierzu crazy? They actually wanted to attack Huaxia? He wondered if Huaxia was prepared. However, from the looks of it, Shire had been locked down for a few days, probably because they were afraid that the news would leak out. No one was allowed to enter or leave. They might be planning something. Fang Yu muttered to himself. The experts of Shire wanted to ambush Huaxia. A moment later, Fang Yu finally reacted. Shire had been itching to attack Huaxia for a long time. However, Huaxia had also been on guard recently. The two states were evenly matched. If they openly challenged them, Shire would have to travel a long distance, while Huaxia would be waiting at ease. Although they were slightly stronger, it would not be easy to succeed. That was why Shire had used this move. Ambush Huaxia. As for locking down the entire territory, it was naturally because they were afraid that the news would leak out. No one could leave Shire. Naturally, the news that they were locked down would not spread to Ethereal. Huaxia was holding a Grandmaster convention recently. They were very good at picking the time. It seemed that they wanted to use this Grandmaster convention to eradicate all the sects in Huaxia. Fang Yu did not know if his guess was right or not, but it should be close to the mark. Right, what about the 5th caravan that was with me last time? After calming himself down, Fang Yu suddenly thought of a crucial problem. Yi Chongxing and the others were from Huaxia. Even if they had the protection of the caravan behind them, Shire might still attack them for the sake of the bigger picture. Thinking of this, Fang Yu was a little nervous. He hoped that nothing would happen to Yi Chongxing and the others. They're fine. Fortunately, the burly man shook his head. Then, he looked at Fang Yu and continued, "They're from the Chamber of Commerce. No matter how bold Shire is, they wouldn't dare to attack them. However, not attacking them doesn't mean they're letting them off. As far as I know, they're now under house arrest in Shire. They won't be able to come out for a while. As long as they don't act recklessly, these people won't make things difficult for them." As the burly man spoke, he kept his guard up. Fang Yu could tell that his route was no longer the route he had taken to come here. Instead, he had been walking on a small path. This fellow was quite reliable. Judging from the meaning of his words and Steward Zhang's style of doing things, they should be fine now. But Fang Yu was different. He did not have the identity of a merchant caravan as a cover. Thinking of this, Fang Yu's eyes suddenly flashed with a trace of doubt. "Wait!" he suddenly shouted as a powerful aura burst out from his fists. Taking 2 careful steps back, Fang Yu looked at the man warily and said, "If I'm not mistaken, you're also a local of Shire, right? Since you're a local, you should know the consequences of coming out to welcome an outsider like me, right? Also, the Shire region is so tightly sealed. Where are you taking me?" By the time he finished speaking, Fang Yu's aura had already reached its limit. He did not beat around the bush and asked directly, "Don't tell me you're taking me to get a reward? Tell me, how much is an outsider worth?" Fang Yu's words were extremely cold. At the same time, he was ready to make a move. Previously, at the so-called entrance of Mount Desolate City, he had almost recovered the spiritual energy that he had consumed. Now, there was absolutely no problem for him to make a move. "Brother, you've misunderstood me." The burly man seemed to have been mentally prepared. He was not a fool. It was obvious that he understood the meaning of Fang Yu's words. He shook his head directly, looked at Fang Yu sincerely and said, "In all honesty, although I'm just a boatman, at least I have a conscience. Since you're my boat, I naturally have the responsibility to be responsible for your safety." Looking at the burly man's sincere eyes, Fang Yu slightly restrained his aura. "I think it's not that simple, right?" Fang Yu saw that the burly man was an honest man. What he said was not far from the truth, but vaguely, he was still hiding something. There was something he did not say. "Forget it, I don't know how to lie. I knew I couldn't hide it from you." As expected, the burly man shook his head helplessly. He looked at Fang Yu and said, "Everything I did was ordered by someone." After saying that, he took out the crystals from his pocket. 3 crystals. It was not a lot, but to him, it was enough for half a year's expenses. "This is—" Fang Yu frowned and asked in confusion. "This was ordered by the person who was with you the last time. He asked me to send you out safely." The burly man smiled and did not say anything more. "Yi Chongxing?" Fang Yu immediately reacted. Wasn't the person who was with Fang Yu the last time Yi Chongxing and his group? This guy is quite loyal. Fang Yu smiled bitterly and shook his head. Yi Chongxing was a sentimental person. Although he and Fang Yu could not be considered close friends, this action had indeed moved Fang Yu. Compared to that old guy, this Yi Chongxing was too conscientious. After thinking for a while, Fang Yu directly took out 10 crystals and handed them to the burly man. "When we go back, give these crystals to him and thank him for me." After experiencing life and death, Fang Yu had already become indifferent to crystals. 10 crystals were not a lot, but Fang Yu knew that if he gave too much, Yi Chongxing would not accept it. As he muttered to himself, the burly man had already sailed the boat out of the waters near Quicksand City. That place was now surrounded by many experts. Not many people knew about this small path. The burly man had chosen this path for safety reasons. Along the way, the burly man was very careful. If they followed this waterway out of Quicksand City, they would be out of Shire. At that time, Fang Yu would naturally be safe. It had to be said that this burly man was quite considerate. Fang Yu sat quietly on the boat, thinking to himself. It seemed that it would not be long before Shire would make a move against Tao Wei. He did not know if they were prepared, but Fang Yu had already made up his mind. He had to hurry back and tell this news to those people in Tao Wei. Although he did not have much to do with Tao Wei, Fang Yu understood the principle of interdependence. Once Tao Wei no longer existed, once Shire's forces continued to expand westward and joined forces with those in the western wastelands, Tao Wei's space, including the Divination Institute, would not be peaceful. The 4 great academies would also be implicated. Fang Yu did not want to see this kind of thing happen. He was somewhat anxious. Faintly, he could already see the existence of land. Once he reached there, he would be out of Shire. Along the way, the burly man was familiar with the path and did not meet anyone. He arrived here safely. Chapter 663. At this point, the burly man heaved a sigh of relief. He had completed his mission of bringing Fang Yu out safely. Now, the 3 crystals belonged to him. Not only the burly man, but even Fang Yu was caught off guard. However, right at this moment, several auras suddenly swept past Fang Yu's back. "Oh no, we've been discovered." The burly man frowned and his expression suddenly changed. He was very familiar with this aura. It belonged to the guards of the Song family in Quicksand City in Shire State. He did not know why they had tracked him here, but the burly man's expression had already changed. Behind him, a merchant ship had already appeared. Several figures flashed past in the merchant ship. The auras of those figures were very strong. Behind them were the guards of the Song family. It seemed that they had expected some fish to slip through the net. "I told you, these waters are definitely not safe. There's a small path to get here. Wait here, there's bound to be a big fish taking the bait." On the merchant ship, 2 middle-aged men sneered. After a while, the merchant ship stopped Fang Yu's small boat. "My lords, we're just fishermen who come here to catch fish for a living. May I know what's the matter?" The burly man was quick-witted. He forced himself to hide the panic on his face and explained. The middle-aged man frowned and stood on the merchant ship. He looked at the burly man with a smile and said, "Did I ask you what you're here for? Why, could it be that you're guilty?" The middle-aged man put on a fake smile. His eyes emitted a power that could read people's minds. This guy's cultivation was at the peak of the martial emperor realm. No one knew how long he had been in this realm. His strength was unfathomable. He stared straight at the burly man. A strange expression appeared on the honest burly man's face. He did not know how to lie. He had let the cat out of the bag. Fang Yu muttered to himself. He had let the cat out of the bag with just one sentence. It was obvious that he had a guilty conscience. "My lords, we didn't offend you, did we?" Fang Yu looked at the middle-aged man on the merchant ship and asked with a smile. "Of course he didn't offend us." The middle-aged man chuckled as he looked at Fang Yu. "If there's nothing else, we'll take our leave first." Fang Yu smiled and prepared to row the boat. Just as he was about to leave, he was stopped by the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man chuckled as he looked at the burly man and said, "Looking at your attire, you are indeed a fisherman of this generation. But where did this kid come from? Judging from his attire, he looks like someone from another province." After he finished speaking, an aura suddenly burst out from his body. This aura instantly enveloped Fang Yu. "From Guizhou." He came in with the 5th caravan. I recognize him. Sure enough, as soon as the middle-aged man finished speaking, a guard recognized Fang Yu. He pointed at Fang Yu and said with certainty, "This guy is from Bai'an Prefecture." "It's over," Fang Yu cursed inwardly. This time there was really no way to explain. This guard was the one who was in charge of inspecting their caravan last time. "Since you're from Bai'an Prefecture, then follow me to Tiger's Denver. If you can come out alive, I'll let you go back." As soon as the guard finished speaking, a gloomy expression appeared on the middle-aged man's face. A terrifying aura burst out from his fists as he attacked Fang Yu. This punch was as fast as lightning, but he did not use his full strength. It was as if he did not intend to kill Fang Yu directly. 5, 6, 7. Fang Yu counted in his heart. This group of guards, including the 2 old men, had a total of 7 people. The power of the ancient chess game should be enough. If not, then he would have to go to Tiger's Den. Boom! The sky-will-swimming dragon extinction instantly attacked and blocked the middle-aged man's violent attack. Then, he turned around and was about to jump into the river. The middle-aged man snorted coldly and waved his hand. He said in a gloomy tone, "Catch him." As soon as he finished speaking, he retreated to the side. However, as soon as he finished speaking, a strange twisting force appeared above his head. The power of the ancient chess game appeared once again and enveloped this space. The middle-aged man was surprised. He had thought that Fang Yu, who was only a martial king, would not be able to cause much trouble. Moreover, his obvious attempt to escape had made the middle-aged man let down his guard. In that instant, the power of the ancient chess game had already enveloped all of them. A beam of light enveloped all of them. Then, their figures disappeared from the merchant ship. Fang Yu heaved a sigh of relief. The spiritual qi in his sea of qi had completely disappeared. "I'm sorry to have dragged you into this." Fang Yu shook his head and looked at the burly man apologetically. It's okay. The burly man had been frightened by the terrifying power that Fang Yu had just unleashed. At this moment, he had yet to react. Fang Yu shook his head. After handing the burly man 2 crystals, he got off the ship. "Let's go, it's not safe here." After giving the order, Fang Yu did not stay any longer. His figure flashed and quickly disappeared from the forest. When he followed the 5th merchant group here, Fang Yu had memorized the route. If he walked along this mountain range, there would be a small path. After passing through the small path, he would find the way to the sandstone castle. As long as he passed the sandstone castle, it would not take long for him to return to Taowei State. He did not know if Taowei State had received the news. Fang Yu was a little nervous. The dragon soaring technique was not very useful in this dense forest. Moreover, when he had used the power of the ancient chess game earlier, he had used up all the spiritual qi in his body. In the span of 2 months, Fang Yu was already in a wasteland. During this period of time, Fang Yu had already gotten used to this barren land. In front of him, a city had vaguely appeared. This city, from far away, Fang Yu had already felt the strong murderous aura and the refreshing smell of blood inside. For the first time, Fang Yu felt a little difficult to accept. However, this time, after experiencing the heart-devouring valley, this little bit of blood was nothing in Fang Yu's eyes. The fighting in the sandstone castle continued. When passing by, there were bursts of fighting sounds coming from inside from time to time. Fang Yu was no longer in the mood to care about the chaotic situation inside. He sped up and walked directly outside the sandstone castle. No one noticed Fang Yu's existence. After all, Fang Yu was alone and did not seem to have any treasures on him. Even if he attracted the attention of the people inside, no one would be interested in provoking him. After passing through the sandstone castle, Fang Yu found the path that the merchant group had taken. Following this path, it would not be long before he returned to Taowei State. As he thought so, the spiritual qi in his Dantian qi sea had almost recovered. Chapter 664. He sped up again. Finally, half a month later, Fang Yu stopped at a mountain peak. Below his feet, he could vaguely see the city densely packed. He couldn't see the city clearly and didn't know what was going on inside. He estimated that it had been less than 3 months. It seemed that the experts from Shire State hadn't arrived yet. Slightly relieved, Fang Yu walked into Chiori City along the way he came. Chiori City was still the same as when he left. It was deserted. There were a few people passing by on the street. Compared to distant Star City, it was a far cry. Fang Yu found someone to inquire. It seemed that the people who went to participate in the sect meeting hadn't returned yet. For some reason, this great sect meeting actually lasted for such a long time. Usually, it would end in 3 to 5 days at most. This time, it actually lasted for several months. For some reason, Fang Yu didn't stay for long. Following the direction on the map, Fang Yu hurried all the way. When he arrived at distant Star City, it was already a few days later. When Fang Yu stopped at the periphery of Yuan Formation, he was slightly stunned. Then, he was dumbfounded. There was no life in the entire distant Star City. Silence. It was strangely quiet. The extremely clamorous, crowded, and bustling distant Star City was actually completely empty at this moment. Compared to Chiori City, it looked even more empty. The street was deserted. Not to mention people, there wasn't even a single animal. All the doors on the street were tightly shut. This place had already become a dead city. In just a few months, distant Star City had turned from a prosperous city to a dead city. The gap was too big. Fang Yu walked on the street and was secretly on guard. This place was too quiet. Not only that, it was different from the first time he came. Even if Fang Yu released all his perception, he couldn't feel any trace of life. Even when Tian Pavilion's door was tightly shut, there was no life inside. What exactly happened to this city? Fang Yu murmured in his heart. Then, a terrifying thought instantly appeared in his mind. Could it be that the strong cultivators from Shire had already wiped out this generation of cultivators? No. As soon as this thought appeared, Fang Yu dismissed it. There was no smell of blood here, nor were there any traces of killing. But a city with hundreds of thousands of people, including countless experts, mysteriously disappeared. No matter what, it was impossible. Fang Yu didn't dare to continue thinking. He quickened his pace and ran directly to the tavern. That was the place where all the disciples of the sect would be staying for the great sect meeting. The old man and Xian Jizi's disciples were all staying there. After a while, Fang Yu stopped outside the tavern. He was a little confused. This place, too, was extremely quiet. From the outside, there were no traces of fighting battle. He walked into the tavern. In the tavern, the tables were neatly arranged, and there didn't seem to be anything wrong with them. The tables were covered with dust, as if no one had taken care of them for a long time. Fang Yu hurriedly ran to the second floor, to the old man's room. He pushed the door open and entered. A musty smell greeted him. It wasn't the smell of alcohol as he had imagined. The place where the old man had stayed would be filled with a lingering smell of alcohol, even if it was 10 days or half a month. But here, there was only a musty smell. It was obvious that the old man didn't stay here for long. Fang Yu walked into the room. After looking around, he realized that the old man's wine jug was hanging by the bed. The old man was addicted to alcohol. He had been carrying this wine jug with him ever since he met him. Now that he was here, it was obvious that he had something to tell Fang Yu. He took down the wine jug. When he opened it, as expected, there was a note left inside. On the note, there were a few words written in a mess. "Leave quickly. Find the alchemy saint." Other than these crooked words, there was no other information. The note did not state where they were heading to or what had happened in the distant Star City. However, the old man rarely spoke in such an anxious tone. It seemed that the matter was not simple. Thinking of this, Fang Yu hurriedly put away the wine jug and walked in the direction of Mount Purple Spirit. The alchemy saint was in Mount Purple Spirit. The old man and the alchemy saint knew each other and even had a relationship. He asked Fang Yu to look for him. Obviously, there was something. But this was also good. Fang Yu had just taken back the yellow soil of Mount Desolate City. It was time for him to look for the alchemy saint. After carefully leaving Distant Star City, Fang Yu breathed a sigh of relief. Distant Star City was dead silent. In the past, Fang Yu wouldn't have been able to accept it. However, on the way to Sierzu, Fang Yu was used to the desolation. Mount Purple Spirit wasn't too far from here. It was in Qiushi City. Fang Yu had just come from there. After returning to Qiushi City, it was still the same. Fang Yu asked someone, but he didn't seem to know what had happened in Distant Star City. Fang Yu had no choice but to go to Mount Purple Spirit. He should know when he found the alchemy saint. Mount Purple Spirit was behind Qiushi City. There was a dense forest there. Fang Yu remembered the way clearly. It didn't take him much effort to find the way up the mountain. Passing through the canyon, he didn't see any trace of spirit beasts. The edge of the earth vein fire was in this canyon. Out of this canyon, in the dense forest below, was where the alchemy saint was. He released all his perception. There was no other aura around. Quiet and strange. Different from the last time he came, there was no trace of spirit beasts in this canyon. Shrugging, Fang Yu quickened his pace. An hour later, a purple bamboo forest gradually appeared in front of him. Behind the purple bamboo forest was a simple wooden house. From time to time, the fragrance of pills would come out of the wooden house. Senior Alchemy Saint. Passing through the purple bamboo forest, Fang Yu shouted into the wooden house. "Come in!" Inside the wooden house, the alchemy saint's hoarse voice came. Even though a few months had passed, the fragrance of the supreme-grade elixir still lingered in the wooden house. The alchemy saint was still there. Fang Yu was overjoyed and walked into the wooden house. In the wooden house, the alchemy furnace had been changed. Fang Yu sensed it. The earth vein fire had moved a little. It was no wonder that the alchemy saint would move the alchemy furnace. It seemed that he knew this earth vein fire very well. It was only a few meters, but the alchemy furnace also moved with it. In the wooden house, except for the alchemy furnace and the spiritual herbs hanging around, there was nothing else. There was no sign of the old man. Fang Yu was a little puzzled and looked around. Has the wine immortal never been here? Fang Yu looked at the alchemy saint and asked. Chapter 665. Take a seat. The alchemy saint did not answer Fang Yu. Instead, he waved his hand and gestured for Fang Yu to sit down. Then, he focused his mind on the alchemy cauldron again. It seemed that the elixir that he was refining this time was not of a high grade. He did not look satisfied. The purple daylily that Fang Yu had spent a lot of money to purchase from the crystal store was casually placed aside by the alchemy saint. He did not seem to treat it as a treasure and had no intention of refining it. There was a black elixir lying quietly in the alchemy cauldron. Lin Fan sensed that the elixir's grade was not higher than the supreme grade. This kind of elixir would cause quite a stir outside. However, it was nothing in Fang Yu's eyes. Even so, the alchemy saint was still very serious about refining elixirs. He carefully circulated the spiritual energy in his body and moved it around the alchemy cauldron as if he was treating the supreme grade elixir. The process of smelling the fragrance was quite important. Therefore, Fang Yu did not disturb him. He sat quietly at the side and waited for a while. Then, the alchemy saint slowly withdrew his aura. Then, he looked at Fang Yu. "You're here to look for your unlucky master, right?" The alchemy saint changed his usual elegant and dignified manner and spoke with fragrance. "He asked me to look for you." Fang Yu shook his head and corrected the alchemy saint. "I see." The alchemy saint nodded and then snorted. "Since that old man asked you to look for me, He must have gone to the origin of heaven and earth. As the alchemy saint said this, he slowly took the elixir out of the alchemy cauldron and looked at it in his hand. Origin of heaven and earth? Fang Yu frowned. It sounded strange, and he was not sure what it was. 2 months ago there was a piece of news from Little Square. It said that there was a change in the origin of heaven and earth. I'm not sure what exactly happened. The alchemy saint continued to look at the elixir. He did not seem to be interested in what he said. Little Square? Isn't that the extreme point of a continent in the legends? Fang Yu frowned again. The Azure Dragon Institute had records of the small square world. Although the records weren't very clear, Fang Yu still had some impression of it. Little Sifang was not a prefecture city, nor was it a place name. It was said that it was the entrance to an area that transcended the continent and any space. Just like the immortal demon grotto, it was an independent spatial world. Moreover, he was wavering. It was located at the western edge of the ethereal state. That border area was called the Little Square. The Little Four Corners was so big that no one had ever been able to cross it. Only one martial sage expert had ever reached the depths of this place. In other words, it was the origin of heaven and earth. It was said that this continent, including all the cities in Shire, Piaomiao, and so on, was just a small crack in the transcendental space behind the 4 cardinal directions. All the experts were only active on this continent. As for the space beyond Little Four Corners, no one had been able to reach it. However, it was said that there were existences that had surpassed the martial saint level there. Over the years, all the experts on this continent had regarded the origin of heaven and earth as the end of the continent. Even the elixir saint didn't know what kind of space and world was behind the end of the continent. For thousands of years, nothing had happened to the origin of heaven and earth. However, according to the elixir saint's words, something must have happened there. Something happened to the origin of heaven and earth? Fang Yu raised his eyebrows for a while before he asked in confusion. Logically speaking, the origin of heaven and earth had been quiet for thousands of years without any abnormalities. Why would something happen at this time? That's what I heard. I'm not interested to know the details. The elixir saint shook his head and continued, let the so-called experts worry about these things. When he said this, he had a self-deprecating look on his face. Then why did the distant star city become an empty city? Fang Yu was still confused. Logically speaking, the old man and the others had nothing to do with the problem with the origin of heaven and earth. It had nothing to do with the distant star city. Fang Yu couldn't figure out the connection between the two. Those guys from the distant star city? The elixir saint shook his head with a smile and continued, the origin of heaven and earth has changed. They were afraid of being implicated and moved away a long time ago. Not only that, but even the spirit beasts in the ethereal continent have disappeared. I don't know who spread the news, saying that the origin of heaven and earth has changed and that there will be experts who transcend the continent descending. At that time, the ethereal continent, which is closest to the origin of heaven and earth, will naturally be affected. The elixir saint kept the elixir as he spoke. He said this casually, as if he wasn't worried at all. In that case, the old man and the others went to the origin of heaven and earth to stop those so-called experts from descending? Hearing this, Fang Yu could roughly guess what was going on. Be prepared for danger in times of peace. It seemed that the sect meeting this time wasn't just about the Shire continent. It was about the safety of this continent. Fortunately, the Shire continent was planning to attack the Ruashi continent. The difference between the two could be said to be huge. How long have they been there? Fang Yu shrugged and asked again. Based on the time, they should be here soon. The elixir saint replied and continued to pack the spiritual herbs. Fang Yu nodded and handed the yellow mud he brought back from the desolate city mountain to the elixir saint. The matter of the origin of heaven and earth was not what Fang Yu needed to worry about now. After all, it was still uncertain whether the transcendent continent existed or not. Even if it did, even if the experts from that side were to descend on this continent, their strength would definitely be incomparably terrifying. Naturally, it wasn't something that Fang Yu could stop. Since so many experts had already gone to the Ruashi continent, Fang Yu naturally wouldn't be missing. After handing the yellow mud to the elixir saint, Fang Yu said with a smile, "Senior, this yellow mud from the desolate city mountain is the material for refining a high-quality brick kiln. Now that I've taken it back, don't go back on your word." "Oh!" As soon as Fang Yu finished speaking, the elixir saint frowned. Looking at the yellow mud in Fang Yu's hand, he was immediately overjoyed. "I didn't expect you to be so capable." After saying that, he put the spiritual herbs back in his hand. He paused for a moment and continued, "Leave it with me. You can come and get it in 3 months. I'm not like your master who goes back on his word." The elixir saint agreed and looked at Fang Yu with a smile. He didn't forget to insult the old man indirectly. Fang Yu nodded and bowed. "Then I'll come and get it in 3 months. After saying that, he got up and left. 3 months wasn't a long time. However, if he stayed with the elixir saint, he would definitely be bored to death. Fang Yu wasn't obsessed with elixirs. Chapter 666. It was definitely not Fang Yu's style to deal with flowers and plants all day long. Now that the old man had gone to the origin of heaven and earth, Fang Yu had nothing to worry about. After wandering around Autumn Sun City, Fang Yu decided to return to the Tianji Institute first. After staying in Autumn Sun City for a while, Fang Yu was about to leave when a group of figures appeared in the mountains not far away. It was the 5th merchant team. Fang Yu was very familiar with this team. It was Steward Zhang's team. Yi Chongxing was also in it. After returning from Shire Province, Fang Yu had been worried about their safety. It seemed that the people from Shire Province had no intention of making things difficult for them and had let them go. The team slowly walked into Autumn Sun City. Fang Yu had been waiting for a long time. "I didn't expect you to still be alive." Yi Chongxing looked at Fang Yu in surprise. The situation in Shire Province was very complicated. He had thought that Fang Yu would definitely not be able to return. Now that he saw Fang Yu safe and sound, he was somewhat surprised. "Why are you back?" Fang Yu frowned. Logically speaking, the experts from Shire Province should be preparing to attack Taowei Province. Even if they had the backing of a merchant team, the people from Shire Province would obviously not give them face. News of what happened in Taowei Province has already spread to Shire Province. Yi Chongxing shook his head and said, "The experts from Shire Province have already received news of the abnormality in the origin of heaven and earth. It's said that the experts from distant Star City have already gone to the origin of heaven and earth. Shire Province won't do anything to Taowei Province for the time being." At this point, Yi Chongxing laughed coldly. "They must be very anxious now. They want to reach there before the experts from distant Star City reach the origin of heaven and earth." "Why is that?" Fang Yu was somewhat puzzled. The origin of heaven and earth was desolate and the environment was harsh. There were no opportunities, nor were there anything that would make people go crazy. Moreover, that was the so-called entrance to the transcendent continent. It was extremely dangerous. With the personalities of the experts from Shire Province, they would naturally not take this risk. "That I don't know." Yi Chongxing shook his head. Their caravan had been under house arrest in Shire. Not long after Fang Yu left, he was released. They had heard about these things on their way here. However, I reckon that this is Martial Sage Lin Tian's idea. Yi Chongxing frowned. After a long while, he slowly opened his mouth. "Martial Saint Lin Tian?" Fang Yu was stunned. Martial Sage Lin Tian was one of the few martial sages in the mainland. Back then, he was the one who had discovered the location of the source of heaven and earth. He was also the first person to walk the furthest in the little square. However, there were very few rumors about Marshal Saint Lin Tian. However, Fang Yu knew that his strength had not reached the martial sage realm. Instead, it was only after the origin of heaven and earth had traveled one round that he had reached this pinnacle state. Moreover, he was also the one who said that the origin of heaven and earth was the entrance to the transcendent continent. He was from the Shire, so it was easy for him to get the people of the Shire to listen to him. Back then, before Martial Sage Lin Tian had reached the origin of heaven and earth, he had already been a martial honorable. However, his whereabouts had always been rather secretive. The last time he had appeared was a few decades ago. It was said that he had gone one round around Shire. However, since then, he had disappeared again. It was said that he had returned to the origin of heaven and earth and had not appeared until now. Those who had seen him said that his personality was extremely strange and mysterious. It was as if he was searching for something and that something was in front of the origin of heaven and earth in the little square. It seemed to be related to the so-called transcendent continent behind the origin of heaven and earth. The environment over at the origin of heaven and earth was harsh. There was no one there to govern and there were no rules. It was like a sandcastle, a place where the strong lived. In Taoyuan Prefecture or Shire Prefecture, everyone more or less had some influence behind them. In addition, the big families kept each other in check, so basically there wouldn't be much chaos. However, in the barren land of the origin of heaven and earth, it was different. Even a martial honorable could die at any time. And that place was a paradise for the strong. Many martial honorable experts were entrenched in that area, as if they were looking for something. As for the battles there, they would frequently occur. Many martial honorables had died there. As for martial emperors, they were like ants in that place. They were not even worth mentioning. Martial Sage Lin Tian wants them to go to the origin of heaven and earth? Fang Yu furrowed his brows and asked in confusion. Yi Chongxing nodded and said, "This is just my guess. However, I heard from the people there that once the origin of heaven and earth becomes abnormal, the space will become chaotic. There were even rumors that once one had the chance to step into the chaotic space, they might be able to reach the legendary transcendent continent. It was said that on the transcendent continent, there were existences that surpassed martial emperors. There were countless heavenly treasures." When Yi Chongxing said this, Fang Yu gradually came to his senses. No wonder they were all fighting to go to the origin of heaven and earth. No matter how high a martial artist's cultivation was, he would at most reach the martial emperor realm in this life. Reaching the martial emperor realm was like reaching the top of the world. It was completely impossible to break through again. Although the martial emperor realm was an existence that many cultivators yearned for, it did not mean that there was no one who could reach it. Martial artists were busy all their lives for cultivation. Whether it was fighting, slaughtering, or running around. Just like in Desolate City Mountain, those people were all squeezing their heads to get the opportunity on Desolate City Mountain. It was all for the sake of increasing their cultivation. All of them, including Fang Yu, had been rushing about for the sake of crystals. And the crystals were also what he used to exchange for cultivation. In the end, everyone was running around for the ultimate goal, the martial emperor realm. However, once one stepped into the martial emperor realm, would one be invincible? Obviously not. After reaching the top, one would stop moving forward. And behind them, there was an endless stream of people who stepped onto the path of the martial emperor realm. In time, when everyone's cultivation reached the martial emperor realm, wouldn't the world be in chaos? Therefore, the powerhouses all had the heart to prepare for a rainy day. The transcendent continent behind the origin of heaven and earth was their heart to break through. Only on the side of the origin of heaven and earth, there was hope to enter the transcendent continent. If they went there, they would have a higher space for development. Therefore, the origin of heaven and earth became the yearning of the powerhouses. Not many powerhouses could resist such a temptation. As for the reason for the abnormality of the origin of heaven and earth, Fang Yu did not know. However, at this point, Yi Chongxing shook his head and said, "The so-called transcendent continent. Maybe it's just a legend, just a legend." It was obvious that he was still rational. Chapter 667. Fang Yu wasn't interested in the transcendent continent. For him, there was still a long way to go. With his current cultivation, going to the origin of heaven and earth was tantamount to courting death. However, Fang Yu saw a trace of desire in Yi Chongxing's eyes. Although he was talking about the transcendent continent, there was already some anticipation in his eyes. "Don't tell me you want to give it a try too?" Seeing Yi Chongxing's expression, Fang Yu was a little surprised. He was only a peak martial emperor now. Not to mention that there were so many experts on the origin of heaven and earth. With the cultivation of a peak martial emperor, it was difficult to even get close to the origin of heaven and earth. After all, the small square continent wasn't like the Taowu continent. Just the terrain of the spirit beasts, there was enough to intimidate experts below the martial ancestor realm. Yi Chongxing seemed to have a strong desire to forge ahead. He was proud, but not arrogant. He was lonely, but not antisocial. Fang Yu had expected that he would want to go to the transcendent continent to train. The legend of the origin of heaven and earth is too tempting. If I only rely on the caravan for the rest of my life, I probably won't be able to reach the ranks of the experts. Yi Chongxing smiled bitterly and shook his head. The caravan business was destined to be impossible after the Shire and Piao continent broke off relations. At this point, he glanced at Steward Zhang, who was already in the tavern, and continued, "I must go to the origin of heaven and earth. Who would be willing to be ordinary and mediocre for the rest of their lives?" With your current cultivation, Fang Yu smiled slightly and didn't continue. Yi Chongxing had a strong self-esteem, and Fang Yu didn't want to hurt him. "It's because my cultivation is too low that I'm determined to go to the cold place to train. If I'm lucky enough to survive, I might even become stronger. If I die there, it's not my fault that I'm not strong enough." Yi Chongxing smiled bitterly and didn't take Fang Yu's words to heart. "Since you've made up your mind, when are you leaving?" Fang Yu raised his eyebrows and asked. Although he hadn't known Yi Chongxing for long, Fang Yu understood his character very well. Once he had decided on something, even his master, Steward Zhang, could not change his mind. "After I'm done with the caravan, we'll set off in a few days." Yi Chongxing didn't hide anything. He looked at Butler Zhang and said. He turned around and looked at Fang Yu with great interest. "Don't you want to go and gain some experience? It's not time yet." Fang Yu shook his head decisively. He was destined to be different from Yi Chongxing, and his thoughts would definitely not be so extreme. He knew his own strength very well. If he went to the origin of heaven and earth, he would be considered lucky if he could make it there alive. What's more, Fang Yu had the system in his hands. It was much easier for him to raise his cultivation level compared to others. Therefore, they were destined not to walk on the same path. "If you come in the future, remember to look for me." Yi Chongxing wasn't too surprised by Fang Yu's reaction. He knew very well that Fang Yu wasn't someone who liked to take risks. Without saying anything else, he patted Fang Yu's shoulder and walked into the tavern. Perhaps, Fang Yu nodded and watched as Yi Chongxing's figure slowly disappeared. The origin of heaven and earth wasn't much of a temptation to him. Perhaps when he became stronger in the future, he would make a trip there. After bidding farewell to Yi Chongxing, Fang Yu walked out of Autumn Sun City. He gazed into the distance. The old man from the Heaven Secrets Institute had already gone to the origin of heaven and earth. Before he left, he had told Fang Yu to find the pill sage. Perhaps he didn't want Fang Yu to get involved in this mess. Without the old man's restrictions, Fang Yu wasn't used to it. He didn't really want to return to the Heaven Secrets Institute. He was different from Blue Knight. He wasn't used to staying in that kind of cold and cheerless environment for long periods of time. Moreover, he had to face those two unlucky senior brothers all day long. It was really boring. Thinking about it, it had been a while since he left the Azure Dragon Institute. In the blink of an eye, it had been almost 2 years since he was kidnapped by the old man from the Azure Dragon Institute to the Heaven Secrets Institute. He hadn't gone back for such a long time. He didn't know how the Azure Dragon Institute was doing. Thinking of this, Fang Yu was already anxious to return. It wasn't easy to get rid of the old man. He had to go back to the Azure Dragon Institute to take a look. Quickening his pace, Fang Yu returned the way he came. A month later, Fang Yu had already left the range of the Taowu State. Behind him was the location of the Vermilion Bird Institute. There, it was already bustling with noise. Quite a number of students were cultivating. Fang Yu didn't stop and continued to walk towards the Azure Dragon Institute. Beneath his feet was a mountain peak. Things had changed with the passage of time. Back then, when Fang Yu participated in the 100-man battle, he was still a 4-star martial spirit. After training here for a long time, he barely reached the peak of the martial spirit realm. Back then, he had to be careful everywhere here. Even the lowest level of spirit beasts had to be on guard. Now, he could wander freely in this part of the forest without any hindrance. Those spirit beasts were no longer worthy of his attention. With just a slight move, he could directly kill these spirit beasts. Fang Yu sighed in his heart. Unknowingly, he had already arrived at the location of the Azure Dragon Institute. It was still so familiar. It was the same. In the square, many familiar students were practicing. There were also some newly recruited students that Fang Yu had never seen before. Releasing all of his perception, Fang Yu couldn't help but frown. Since when did the Azure Dragon Institute have so many Martial King Realm experts? His perception continued to scan, and Fang Yu was already a little shocked. In the Azure Dragon Institute, there was actually a 6-path Martial King Realm expert. Not only that, there was also an aura. It was very strong and seemed to be almost at the Martial Emperor realm. In just 2 years, the Azure Dragon Institute was able to cultivate so many experts? It was obviously impossible. When he left that year, only Lai Kuang was already at the peak of the Martial Spirit realm and was about to enter the Martial King realm. It was impossible for the others to improve so quickly in just 2 years. In that case, if they weren't from the Azure Dragon Institute, they should be outsiders. Fang Yu wasn't familiar with these auras and didn't know where these outsiders came from. He slowly entered the Azure Dragon Institute. Most of the students were cultivating and didn't notice Fang Yu's existence. However, Fang Yu's gaze was already on the meeting hall. The auras of those experts were coming from the meeting hall. Back then, Fang Yu had also followed the old man and left the meeting hall. It seemed that something had happened in the Azure Dragon Institute. In the square outside the meeting hall, a few students were gathered in 2s and 3s. They seemed to be discussing the people in the meeting hall. I heard that these guys are here to cause trouble. They are really heartless. There are 2 of them, and they are former students of our Azure Dragon Institute. Bah! They are now members of the Sword Sect. Who would still recognize your Azure Dragon Institute? Chapter 668. In the square, a few people's whispers reached Fang Yu's ears. Fang Yu frowned. From their words, the people who came should be from the Sword Sect. Moreover, they were once students of the Azure Dragon Institute. Now that their status had risen, they seemed to be here to take revenge for the unfair treatment they received in the Azure Dragon Institute. Muttering in his heart, Fang Yu walked to the side of the 2 students who were discussing. He forcefully suppressed his aura and looked at the two, asking, "What is the purpose of the people inside here? You still don't know?" Seeing Fang Yu, the two newly recruited students were not surprised. After all, there were dozens of new students every year. It was normal not to recognize all of them. The two looked at Fang Yu and said, "These people are here for revenge." Revenge? Fang Yu raised his eyebrows. He was somewhat surprised. The Azure Dragon Institute had always been low-key. Vice Principal Wang did not allow students to cause trouble outside. It could be said that apart from the demon race, the Azure Dragon Institute had not offended anyone. Why would they offend a former student? That's right. The two nodded at the same time. One of them seemed to have come earlier and knew more. He blinked and said, "I heard that these people were beaten up by former students of the Azure Dragon Institute. They are now here to ask for people. It seems that this matter is not small. There are many people on the other side." Beaten up by former students of the Azure Dragon Institute? People from the Sword Sect. Fang Yu shook his head in confusion. Who would dare to beat up a disciple of the Sword Sect? Not even the former students of the Azure Dragon Institute. However, only Fang Yu dared to do so. To be more precise, it was the old guy who forced Fang Yu to do so. They were obviously here for Fang Yu. However, didn't they have a look of enjoyment on their faces when they begged Fang Yu to beat them up? "Why are you turning your back on me now? And they even came to the Azure Dragon Institute?" After thinking for a while, Fang Yu understood. These guys must be afraid of the Heaven's Chance Department, so they didn't dare to directly come to Fang Yu's door. They could only use such despicable methods to force Fang Yu out. Logically speaking, their sword sect master Tiandu was a reasonable person who knew right from wrong. Even if he didn't give face to the monk, he still had to give face to the Buddha. He definitely wouldn't allow this group of disciples to seek revenge. After all, the old man was an unreasonable person. He had been displeased with the sword sect for a long time, and he was just worried that he couldn't find a reason to teach them a lesson. If he did that, wouldn't he be giving the old man an excuse? At that time, the old fellow might go mad and directly sweep through the entire sword sect. He really couldn't figure out where they got the courage to come to the Azure Dragon Academy. However, now that Fang Yu was back, it was a small world. Fang Yu slowly walked into the meeting hall, but he didn't push the door open. After all, this was the Azure Dragon Academy's rule. Without Vice Principal Wang's permission, no one could casually enter or leave. Standing at the door, Fang Yu could vaguely hear the voices of several people in the meeting hall. "Vice Principal Wang, after all, we were once students of the Azure Dragon Academy. It's not good for you to shield senior brother Fang like this, right?" "That's right, as the head of the academy, shouldn't you treat us equally? Quickly ask senior brother Fang to come here. We promise that we won't make things difficult for the Azure Dragon Academy." In the ceremony hall, a few strange voices slowly floated out. Fang Yu found this voice extremely familiar. It was the same person who had called him senior brother the last time at the Sword Sect. These guys had directly abandoned their identities as students of the Azure Dragon Academy and joined the Sword Sect. Now that their identities had risen and they were very powerful, the tone of their voices had become much more arrogant. In particular, the words, "the Azure Dragon Academy," were especially harsh. "I said, I don't care what grudges you have. After all, you are no longer students of the Azure Dragon Academy, so you have no reason to cause trouble here. If you want to find senior brother Fang, you naturally have to go to the Heavenji Courtyard. What are you doing here?" Vice Principal Wang's tone was obviously not good. He was greatly angered by these guys. Not only did they betray him, they even came back to cause trouble. Most importantly, the person they were looking for was no longer in the Azure Dragon Academy. "Vice Principal Wang, you're treating us as outsiders. We don't know where senior brother Fang is at the Heavenji Courtyard. However, we know that senior brother Fang listens to you the most. If you ask him to come, he will definitely come. I'll have to trouble you to ask him to come. The discordant tone sounded again. Intentionally or unintentionally, it seemed to be threatening Vice Principal Wang. Don't even think about it. Vice Principal Wang was obviously quite angry. He directly snorted coldly. Vice Principal Wang, don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. We're advising you nicely. Why do you insist on being stubborn? Several members of the Sword Sect spoke out at this moment. It seemed that they were helping the two former students of the Azure Dragon Academy fight for justice, but in reality, they were avenging their Sword Sect. You guys can't be thinking that I'll give you face just because you're from the Sword Sect, right? Let me tell you, this is the Azure Dragon Academy. It's not a place for you to act recklessly. Vice Principal Wang seemed to have lost his patience. He was baffled by these unreasonable people. Just by listening to his tone, it seemed like he was about to go berserk. Since you're unmoved by force or persuasion, then don't blame us. Hearing this, the few members of the Sword Sect spoke in a sinister tone. A terrifying aura exploded from their bodies. It was obvious that they were threatening Vice Principal Wang. They might even attack him. What, you still want to attack me? Vice Principal Wang snorted coldly and said, "Let's see if you have the ability to do so." After he finished speaking, a violent aura shrouded the entire space. Vice Principal Wang's strength had increased again. At this moment, his cultivation was already at the peak of the Martial Emperor realm. This surprised Fang Yu. Vice Principal Wang, let's talk nicely. We're not here to cause trouble. We're only here to ask you for a person. Since you're unwilling, we'll leave. After being shrouded by this violent aura, the few of them were no longer arrogant. After all, this was the territory of the Azure Dragon Academy. If they were to attack, although they wouldn't fall into a disadvantage, there were so many powerful students in the Azure Dragon Academy. Once they were attacked by a group, it would be difficult for them to escape unscathed. They understood the principle that a powerful dragon couldn't suppress a snake in its old haunt. Get the hell out of the Azure Dragon Academy in 5 breaths of time. Vice Principal Wang's aura faintly restrained when he heard this. He snorted coldly, and his entire body emitted a dignified aura. Even though they were separated by the door of the meeting hall, Fang Yu could still feel it. Not only that, he even added, "If you dare step foot into our Azure Dragon Academy again in the future, don't blame me." The meaning of these words was very clear. It was a warning, telling them that not everyone could bully the Azure Dragon Academy. Especially people like them who betrayed the Academy. Vice Principal Wang, why are you so angry? Chapter 669. The former students of Azure Dragon Academy were still somewhat fearful of Vice Dean Wang's prestige. Since you don't welcome us, then we won't come in the future. We'll leave now. After saying this coldly, he called out to the others and walked out of the meeting hall. Since you're here, why don't you stay for a while before leaving? Vice Dean Wang doesn't welcome you, but I do. The door to the meeting hall slowly opened. Fang Yu couldn't be more familiar with the figures inside. They were the inner court disciples of the Sword Sect. Fang Yu still remembered them clearly. It was even to the extent that he still remembered in his dreams that day in the Sword Sect, in front of their elders. All of these people looked as if they were asking for a beating, and they incessantly begged Fang Yu to beat them up. Especially the 2 former students of the Azure Dragon Academy. They called each other senior brother affectionately. Fang Yu couldn't understand. They were clearly the ones asking for a beating, so why did they suddenly turn hostile at this time? Were the members of the Sword Sect all petty people? He couldn't figure it out in his heart, so he could only block in front of them and look at them with a smile. It's you? It's really you. When they opened the door to the meeting hall and saw Fang Yu at the door with a smile, They couldn't help but be stunned at the same time. Senior Brother Fong, we meet again. The two former students of Azure Dragon Academy were still rather calm. After all, when they were in the sword sect, Fong Yu had taken care of them quite a bit. The two of them walked in front of Fong Yu with a smile. The cheeky and fawning appearance of the past had disappeared without a trace, replaced by gloomy expressions. Senior Brother Fong, you still dare to come back? We still haven't forgotten the training you gave us that day. The two former students of Azure Dragon Academy instantly surrounded Fong Yu. Especially when they said training, they intentionally or unintentionally emphasized their tone, as if reminding Fong Yu of something. Oh, Fong Yu suddenly exclaimed. He patted his forehead as if he had suddenly realized something. He looked at the two of them with a complicated look in his eyes. He frowned and asked, could it be that the two of you were not satisfied with the last experience and wanted me to give you more experience? You should have said so earlier. I'm free. It's my pleasure. Come on, which one of you will go first? Fong Yu chuckled as he looked at the two of them. His eyes were filled with mockery. The faces of these two fellows turned green. It was dark green. A trace of anger flashed in his eyes. He just stared straight at Fong Yu, wanting to eat him up. Sigh, why did you have to come back at this time of all times? In the ceremony hall, Vice Principal Wang sighed. He already knew the relationship between Fong Yu and them. He didn't take it seriously, but he didn't expect that Fong Yu would come back at this time. Not too early or too late, they just happened to bump into each other. Originally, the crisis of the Azure Dragon Institute had been resolved, but now, it seemed that a great battle was about to break out. This is the Azure Dragon Institute. What do you want? After thinking, Vice Principal Wang walked out of the meeting hall. The atmosphere outside was already tense to the extreme. Although Fong Yu looked calm and collected, he was only one person after all. Opposite him were 5 inner disciples of the Sword faction. Among them, one of them was about to break through the peak of Martial King. He wanted to side with Fong Yu, so he directly blocked in front of Fong Yu. In the square, many students had already gathered. They were not very polite to these people from the Sword faction. All right, it seems that we don't have to do anything. Vice Principal Wang wants to protect Senior Brother Fong. These people shouldn't be able to do anything. I can't stand their arrogance. Many students had already stood on Fong Yu's side. Excluding those who were just there to watch the show, the situation was almost one-sided. It was obvious that the people of the Azure Dragon Institute were all on Fong Yu's side. Senior Brother Fong, this is the Azure Dragon Institute, after all, it's where we used to stay. I don't want to cause trouble here. The people from the Sword faction were tactful. Seeing that more and more people were gathering, they immediately lost their confidence. After all, this was not their Sword faction's territory, and no one would allow them to do as they pleased to Fong Yu. After thinking for a while, seeing that Fong Yu was really infuriating, he waved his hand and said, of course, although we don't want to cause trouble, if Senior Brother Fong is interested, let's go somewhere else and have a good chat. When he said the last few words, his tone was full of threat. As if he was afraid that Fong Yu would not fall for it, he added, if Senior Brother Fong is not free today, we can talk another day. After all, we have plenty of time. Hee. After hearing this, Fong Yu raised his eyebrows and sneered. What did that mean? Was he threatening him? After a cold laugh, Fong Yu raised his eyebrows and asked, aren't you afraid that your sect master will blame you for causing trouble in such a big way? Sect master? As expected, when Fong Yu said this, the few of them immediately burst into laughter. They naturally thought that Fong Yu was afraid and wanted to use the sect master to suppress them. Unfortunately, sect master has recently gone to the origin of heaven and earth. He won't be back for a while. As for the other elders, of course, they want to have a good chat with you. The people from the Sword faction looked at Fong Yu with a smile. They were sure that Fang Yu had Fang Yu under their control and thought that Fang Yu was afraid. All right, Fang Yu nodded. Since your sect master is not here, then I'll teach you unfilial sons on his behalf. The moment the last sentence came out, Fang Yu's entire body was already emitting a terrifying aura. The sky will roaming dragon extinction instantly attacked. Dense fist shadows condensed in midair. The moment the fist shadows condensed, they merged into one. This time, Fang Yu did not have the slightest intention of holding back. Firstly, it was a warning to them. Secondly, it was also to make them afraid of the Azure Dragon Academy. Fang Yu did not want to cause any trouble for the Azure Dragon Academy. Fang Yu, Vice Principal Wang frowned. He wanted to stop him, but it was obviously too late. On the fist shadows, the huge power had already completely enveloped the few people from the sword faction. Under the envelopment of this power, Vice Principal Wang could not help but frown. He looked at Fang Yu as if he was looking at a monster. On the surface, Fang Yu suppressed his realm very low and still looked like he was at the peak of the martial spirit realm. But in fact, the power that erupted from this punch was enough to contend with a martial emperor realm expert. Even Vice Principal Wang was not completely confident that he could take this punch. Attack! The few disciples of the sword faction were not fools. Although they were in the Azure Dragon Academy, which was someone else's territory, they naturally had no reason to retreat if Fang Yu wanted to fight. The five of them worked together at the same time. The powerful aura gathered into a firm barrier, wanting to block Fang Yu's violent attack. After all, Fang Yu was only one person, and there were five of them. Chapter 670. Unfortunately, the strength of the few of them was still a little weak. The third move of the Sky Will Dragon Absolute Art, 1,000 Years Pilgrimage. Fang Yu was able to execute the technique with ease. After all, in the Battle of the 100 People, there was a bloody battle. A huge fist shadow, accompanied by bursts of dragon roars, directly bombarded the weak barrier. Bang! With a loud noise, Fang Yu's strength did not decrease. In the fist wind, it seemed to be filled with a tearing and devouring power. And the faces of the five disciples of the sword sect were already filled with fear. Fang Yu's power was too violent. It was like 1,000 gold, unstoppable like Mount Tai. Even if the five of them joined forces, it still seemed a little strenuous. A moment later, the dragon roared loudly, and the violent power suddenly strengthened again. Boom, boom, boom! After a series of roars, the barrier formed by the five people was directly smashed into pieces by Fang Yu and dissipated in the surroundings. At the same time, the power on the fist wind did not show the slightest sign of diminishing. All of it went into the body of the former Azure Dragon Academy disciple. The moment he was bombarded by this force, he had completely stopped breathing. So strong, senior brother Fang Yu has become stronger again. This power is too terrifying, isn't it? In the square, the students of the Azure Dragon Academy were dumbfounded as they watched this battle. In their opinion, there was almost no suspense about the outcome. Fang Yu could not be a match for the five of them, unless Vice Principal Wang stepped in to protect him. Otherwise, Fang Yu would definitely have no chance of winning. However, as soon as it began, the situation was one-sided. Fang Yu directly crushed them. This kind of shock was self-evident. Even Vice Principal Wang nodded his head in satisfaction and slowly retracted the aura in his body. He had underestimated Fang Yu's strength. It was no wonder, as the disciple of the Wine Immortal, 2 years had passed. He naturally would not be too bad. In I Shui Han, while everyone was still in shock, Fang Yu had already slowly retracted the power of his fists. The people from the sword sect were no fools. Taking advantage of Fang Yu's pause, one of them directly drew his sword. A stream of light danced in the sky. Within the water column, sword shadows condensed and formed. Above the sword shadow, there was an incomparably cold light. Under the sunlight, the sword light was particularly dazzling. His body was surrounded by a layer of mist. Being in the mist was like falling into a deep abyss. His entire body was firmly welded to death by a whirlpool-like attractive force. This feeling of being at the bottom of the sea was very strong. This was a top-grade cultivation technique. Fang Yu frowned. The disciples of the sword sect that had come this time were all personal disciples of an elder. The sword sect was wealthy to begin with, so it was naturally not difficult for its disciples to cultivate such a top-grade cultivation technique. This is the Azure Dragon Academy. It's not your place to start a massacre here. Vice Principal Wang bellowed in a low voice when he sensed the cold water that filled the sky. In the next second, a strong aura condensed around his body. He waved his hands suddenly, and the strength of a peak martial emperor erupted. That power directly enveloped the cold water that filled the sky. The cold current immediately lost its effect. He was very angry with his words, but his actions were obviously biased towards Fang Yu. Although he didn't need to do anything, Fang Yu could easily get rid of this restraint. However, since Vice Principal Wang was so protective, he couldn't stop him. The feeling of falling into a deep pool instantly disappeared. Fang Yu didn't hesitate at all. The Sin Throne instantly condensed behind him. Black spiritual light spread all around. This part of the world instantly became dark. This spiritual light, why is it black? The disciples of Sword Sect were already dumbfounded. They were already shocked when they felt the monstrous evil aura of the Sin Throne, but when they saw Fang Yu's black martial arts spiritual light, they were still stunned. What kind of attribute was black? Not only them, but even the students of Azure Dragon Academy behind them were a little dumbfounded. They had seen all kinds of spiritual lights, and there were records in the books. However, no one knew what this black color was. While they couldn't figure it out, Fang Yu had already used his actions to tell them. Powerful intent realm energy was poured into the Sin Throne's body without leaving a trace. The Sin Throne's body directly expanded several times. This brat even used his trump card. Run. When the disciples of Sword Sect saw the Sin Throne and the black spiritual light, they completely wanted to retreat in their hearts. In particular, Fang Yu's violent attack just now made them feel even more fearful. What's more, the Sin Throne looked so terrifying. Their thrones weren't even worth mentioning in front of the Sin Throne. Their figures flashed, and they instantly wanted to escape. Fang Yu sneered in his heart. This Sin Throne could no longer be considered his trump card. They weren't qualified to be his true trump card. The corners of his mouth rose slightly. The violent evil aura of the Sin Throne had already enveloped the figures of those who were about to disappear. Then, their bodies were instantly enveloped by a strange power. Their legs seemed to have been welded to death. They couldn't move. What's going on? What kind of power is this? Why can't I move? They were already dumbfounded. Their bodies were controlled and unable to move. This was tantamount to becoming lambs waiting to be slaughtered. A look of horror appeared on his face. This was the power of the Sin Throne's body. Even the powerful Demon Emperor's body would be controlled by the power of the Sin Throne's net in the Immortal Demon Cave. The power that was stronger than the Abyssal Gaze wasn't something that they could break free from. I'll send you on your way, Fang Yu snorted coldly. The spiritual energy in his Dantian's Sea of Qi had already been poured into his fists. When the heavens will roaming dragon attacked, Vice Principal Wang stopped Fang Yu. They are disciples of Sword Sect after all. If they all die in the Azure Dragon Institute, it will definitely cause trouble. It's better to let them go. Vice Principal Wang had a helpless expression and told Fang Yu to stop. He originally didn't want to let these people go. However, due to the power behind them, Vice Principal Wang had no choice but to stop Fang Yu. Just like how Sword Sect was afraid of the old man from the Heaven's Chance Institute, They had no choice. Since you've spoken, then we'll listen to you. Fang Yu waved his hand, and the power of the Sin Throne slowly retracted. As for the others, the binding force on them instantly disappeared. Only the former disciple of Azure Dragon Institute was still standing foolishly in the same place. After being reborn, those people were exhausted from running for their lives. There were already many people who were still standing foolishly. Their figures flashed and disappeared. Hey, you guys, wait for me! The Azure Dragon Institute students stood in the same place and roared loudly, hoping that those people would turn around and save his life. Unfortunately, his voice drifted far away and didn't get any reply. Chapter 671. This is... Vice Principal Wang frowned. He naturally recognized the person who had been abandoned. Azure Dragon Academy's former genius, Vice Principal Wang, was quite optimistic about him. Unfortunately, in the end, he betrayed Azure Dragon Academy without a word and sought refuge with the Sword Sect. Originally, there was still some reluctance in his heart. However, his actions today had caused Vice Principal Wang to completely give up. Since he was reluctant, this guy had already lost his qualifications. Anyone can leave. Only he can't leave. Fang Yu snorted coldly. It was not that he did not give Vice Principal Wang face. It was just that Fang Yu really did not know how to be lenient to such a treacherous guy. While sneering in his heart, the Sky Dragon Absolute had already made his move. Bang! Without a doubt, the former genius of Azure Dragon Academy had stopped breathing. He originally thought that after being recognized by the Sword Sect, he would leave Azure Dragon Academy. Unfortunately, he never thought that one day he would still be buried here. In other words, it was a game of mockery. After cleaning up all of this, Fang Yu breathed a sigh of relief, with a somewhat helpless expression. In the square, the onlooking students were already dumbfounded at this time. There was always a little fear in their eyes when they looked at Fang Yu. After all, Fang Yu's way of doing things was really a little cruel. Of course, they did not know what the two geniuses who were killed by Fang Yu had experienced. Jiu Xian, that old guy, how could he be willing to let you out? Vice Principal Wang looked at Fang Yu with a flat gaze. He seemed to have expected that Fang Yu would do this. On the surface, he was a little surprised, but in fact, he had tacitly agreed. Otherwise, with his strength, it would be extremely easy for him to stop Fang Yu. That old guy is not here recently, I came back to see. Fang Yu did not hide and answered with a smile. Come in and sit. Vice Principal Wang waved his hand and walked into the meeting hall. After pouring 2 cups of tea, Vice Principal Wang looked at Fang Yu and asked, How have you been in the Tianji courtyard these 2 years? Not bad, Fang Yu answered reluctantly. If he were to tell him that he had nothing to do in the Tianji courtyard, he would definitely be angered to death. I think so too. Vice Principal Wang chuckled as he tasted the tea in his cup. He sized up Fang Yu from head to toe. After a long while, he murmured, All right, there are no outsiders here. Don't hide it anymore. My realm was suppressed by you so much that I almost misjudged you. Putting down the cup of tea in his hand, Vice Principal Wang withdrew his gaze from Fang Yu. Fang Yu smiled awkwardly as he unleashed his aura to its fullest. Not bad. Vice Dean Wang nodded his head and sized up Fang Yu once again. 4 stars, Marshal King, you've improved quite quickly. It seems that the old man's insistence on wanting you back then may not be a bad thing for you, Vice Principal Wang said with a chuckle. He felt much more relieved in his heart. It would be a lie to say that he did not hold a grudge against the old man. However, after seeing Fang Yu's improvement, he still felt relieved. However, he did not know that Fang Yu's improvement had nothing to do with the Tianji courtyard. The old man did not teach him anything seriously. Not only that, He even sent him to the nibbling competition. Later on, he even challenged all the sects. If it weren't for the old man, Fang Yu would not have offended the sword sect. Those disciples of the sword sect wouldn't come here today to give their lives away. In the end, it was all the old man's fault. You said that Senior Jiu Xian has not been in the Tianji courtyard recently. Did he go to the place of the origin force as well? After 3 rounds of tea and a series of questions, Vice Principal Wang glanced at Fang Yu and asked, "That's right. Principal, do you know about the origin force too?" Fang Yu raised his eyebrows and asked. Logically speaking, those who went there this time were all sects and forces. The people from the 4 major academies did not seem to have any intention of intervening. However, judging from Vice Principal Wang's expression, he seemed to know a thing or two. In recent days, it seemed that everyone's attention was focused on the origin force. Even Vice Principal Wang was no exception. The origin force is abnormal. This is no longer a secret. Vice Principal Wang shook his head and smiled. Then, he said with a deep gaze, "If I were you, I would follow Jiu Xian to the origin force." Fang Yu frowned, somewhat puzzled. Vice Principal Wang obviously had a hidden meaning. "There's no harm in telling you." Vice Principal Wang smiled slightly, then got up and shook his head at Fang Yu. "Come with me." After saying that, he went directly to the 2nd floor of the conference hall. Fang Yu almost never entered the conference hall when he was in the Azure Dragon Academy. At this moment, he noticed that behind the barrier, there was a staircase leading to the 2nd floor. Following Vice Principal Wang slowly up the stairs, the scene on the 2nd floor was already in full view. This was a place similar to the Zishuan Pavilion. Above the 2nd floor, there was a circle of bookshelves. In the center, there were several display cabinets. Inside were all heavenly spirit and earthly treasures. These spiritual herbs were of very high rank, a bit similar to the spiritual herbs in the Bahuang secret realm. To be able to be placed in such a place, the rank was naturally not bad. While Fang Yu was looking around, Vice Principal Wang had already taken a letter from the bookshelf. This was an ordinary letter. After opening it, it was blank. "This is?" Fang Yu was a little puzzled. "Wait," Vice Principal Wang waved his hand, motioning Fang Yu not to worry. Then, he mobilized the spiritual energy in his body and gathered it on his hand. The power on his hands instantly moved around the envelope. A moment later, the envelope seemed to have sensed something and also emitted an obscure power. After the 2 forces collided, they suddenly disappeared. A moment later, when Fang Yu looked at the envelope again, the letter was faintly emitting a faint aura. Fang Yu couldn't be more familiar with this aura. The aura of spatial distortion. Every time he used spatial transmission, there would be this aura lingering around him. Fang Yu was already used to it. Moreover, under this aura there was a faint power of conception. This power was similar to the power that had been released by the simple wooden box when Fang Yu had discovered the ancient Go puzzle in the Sea of Flowers. This power was very attractive. Everyone wanted to see what was going on. Vice Principal Wang didn't say much. He just waved his hand, motioning Fang Yu to come forward. Fang Yu didn't say much. This letter was not an ordinary letter. It was a power of conception that was condensed with the envelope as a guide. As long as this power of conception was activated through a special method, one would be able to see the situation in the conception as if one was in it. This kind of conception message was like a voice transmission. It was most likely a method used by strong masters above the martial emperor realm to communicate. It could prevent others from prying. Indeed, using this method to record things and explain the content was very important. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.